Yes, welcome. I'd like to call to order our City Council redevelopment meeting of September 27th, 2010 to order. I'll start off with a Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and second on the agenda, any changes to the order of the agenda? Mr. Mulvey, any changes?
No changes this evening.
Okay. Report from closed sessions. Mr. Rubens, anything to report there?
No report from closed session tonight.
Great, thank you. We're on item 4. This is council communication announcements. Let me start by left. Mr. Grocott, anything to report? Mr. Griselli.
I just want to let everyone know that I have been out of town for about 3 weeks. I missed the last council meeting. But I yesterday reviewed the tape of the meeting, and so I'm up to date on everything that our council did 2 weeks ago. I will have to mention, however, that I think that there was some mention of my golf ability in the meeting, and I wanted to make sure that we clarified that you know, some days I'm better than others. So other than that, I just, like I said, wanted to make sure that everyone understood that I read the minutes, watched the tape, so I'm up to date. Thank you.
Great. You want a vote on your golf here?
No, I don't want to vote. No.
Okay, great. Mr. Klein.
Thank you, Mr. Royce. I don't have much to report. In regards to the fire board, we will be having our next meeting October 19th, I believe is the date, at 6:30. And then our staff will be meeting very shortly for another one of the dissolution meetings, and we're still on track for October 2011. And then other than that, this weekend, Carlmont High School snapped a 21-year losing streak to Aragon, so that was a big moment for us Scots. But that's it.
Great, thank you. Mr. Ahmad?
Mr. Mayor, I have 2 things to bring up. One is this morning I took part in a Caltrain press event regarding suicide prevention. Caltrain is going to be putting a number of new no trespassing signs along with suicide hotlines. These are hotlines that are a local phone number. We had just too many unfortunate accidents last year, and specifically we're really going out to put a 10-mile stretch together. This is the first part of some suicide prevention, and I also wanted to point out this is an Operation Lifesaver product. So I'm wearing the pin tonight, and I wanted to give a pin to the mayor also, so you get to be an Operation Lifesaver. And the other thing I did want to bring up, Mr. Grocott brought up a point during a vote regarding the fact that I sit on the Samtrans board, and there was an issue that had to do with Samtrans and how they were going to vote on a parcel assessment. I just wanted to put it out there as policy for myself that when issues come before either Samtrans or Caltrain boards that I sit on, I have been disqualifying myself from those votes so that I can vote on those issues as a San Carlos City councilman, and I don't want those conflicts. So I'm putting that out as just my general policy.
Great. Thank you very much. So a couple activities coming up as we turn the page on the calendar. October 2nd is our citywide garage sale. I know even a few years ago I walked around after the garage sale on garbage night pickup and got a good set of wooden skis that someone was setting out that didn't sell at a garage sale. So there's a lot of bargains out there. Christine, anything more to report? I went on the web page. It's not there. How do people find out more about it? Or
it's San Carlos Together is coordinated this year, so it's sancarlostogether.com, and it's all online, all electronic.
It's .org.
Either one.
.org. Great. Thank you. And also, right after that, we follow through with a grand finale. Our art and wine fair downtown that the chamber puts on. It's always brings in thousands of people, not only from San Carlos, but a lot of cities from around the area. So make sure you note those on our calendar, and hopefully the weather will continue to be summer here for us all for those. Thank you. So moving on to item 5, we have a proclamation here to a real special group. I think Scott Marsters is here to represent our Lions Club. Hello, Scott. Welcome. Randy. And Chris.
Strom, who's the chairman of the White Cane Days this
Oh, wonderful. Beautiful. Okay, maybe you could tell us a little bit more about it after the proclamation. So let me read a proclamation. We are coming up to a weekend which is International Lions International White Cane Day. And let me go through some items here. Whereas the Lions International, an organization with 1.3 million members in the free world, has been dedicating and serving sight for over 65 years. And where San Carlos Lions has been an outstanding service club in the community since 1938. Wow. And helping the needy and the sight problems through the use of its white cane donations. Lions Club has invited its neighbors to share in the savings vision by donating to the White Cane Days event. And so now, therefore, it's proclaimed that I, Mayor Randy Royce, Mayor of City of San Carlos, hereby designate October 2nd, 2010 as Lions International White Cane Day, City of San Carlos, dated this 27th day of September 2010. Congratulations, you guys. Congratulations. So I'd like to hear a little more.
Well, that's what I've got. Beautiful. Okay, so the question comes up, what is White Cane Days? In 1925, Miss Helen Keller challenged the Lions of America to band together to serve the blind and needy with impaired vision. She called her inability to see the greatest of her limitations. The white cane was proposed in 1927 by Lion George Bonham and became not only a symbol stating that the user was blind, but also a tool of sight by feel for the blind and near blind. In 1951, in Monterey Park, California, the Lions invited their neighbors to contribute to the Lions Sight Conservation Fund. The fundraiser is called White Cane Days. Now, thousands of Lions clubs are holding White Cane Days fundraisers. This year, the San Carlos Lions Club will be located in front of Walgreens on El Camino and Glinda's Fudge and more on Laurel Street. Donations raised during White Cane Days are used to support the Lions Eye Foundation, which provides eyeglasses for those who cannot afford them, eye surgery for those who cannot afford it, and eyesight testing for the children. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. Okay, item 6 is public comment. We welcome anybody that would like to speak on a topic that's not on this evening's agenda. Would welcome to do so now. I don't have any formal speaker cards, but would anybody like to talk about anything going on in San Carlos? Okay, good. Move on. Our regular is not here, so we'll go right through that one item. Consent calendar, item 7. Consent calendar are items considered to be routine and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion on these items unless members of the council, staff, or public request that an item be removed for separate action. So with that, before I ask the rest of council for approval of the consent calendar, I, as mayor, personally would like to pull item 7E for further discussion. I also have a speaker card from a Bruce Renati on that item, so we'll be covering that item 7E separately after that. Any other items?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to pull item 7B, Bravo.
Okay. 7B, Bravo, and E. Okay. So I have 7B and 7E. With that, can I have a motion?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to approve items 7A, C, D, F, G, H, and I in our consent calendar.
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
Councilmember Mod?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay, so let's cover these two items. You want to cover 7B first?
Sure. Mr. Mayor, this question actually for the city attorney, and maybe it's a software glitch. This is a meeting that Mr. Grisilli was not present, but if you look at the motions passed, especially on consent calendar and a couple other points, it says 4-1. So there was no vote there, so it should probably read 4-0.
401, yeah.
But I wanted to get just a clarification from the city attorney that in this case, how should that notation be placed?
Yeah, I'm looking at the action item on the consent calendar. It would be 4-0 is the way I think it would read, because that was the number of people present at the meeting.
And just note as absent. Okay, great. So then, I guess making that change, I would move approval of item 7B.
Okay, second?
A second, also commenting that I brought that same point up earlier today with the city clerk. So just to let you know, I actually paid attention to that too. Woohoo! Woohoo! Thank you, Mr. Ahmad.
Roll call, please.
Councilmember Mod?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay. 7E deals with the agenda item here. Approval letter of agreement between Jeff Malte and for our interim city manager services. It's come to my attention that on this topic for interim city manager, that related confidential information was released early. In fact, there was an article in the Post on September 15th in which there was a quote by Mr. Grocott. I just wanted to express as mayor just some personal feelings here that on this 3 points. One is that our code of conduct is very, very specific on reporting of confidential information during closed sessions. Secondly, a lot of the closed session items the public may not be aware of. We deal with labor issues, there's lawsuits, there's property acquisitions and negotiations we go through. And many of these items we need to be very careful. They can have significant impact on our negotiation ability and could actually cause damage in just basically our operations of our city. And third point is, while it appears that again, my own feeling, it appears that there was a breach of information that went out. It was merely of an early release of what we're actually reporting now on this agenda item. We actually now are formally in this agenda item reporting the specific details of the contract and salary information for our interim city manager. So in summary, again, my feeling is it appears that confidential information was released early. And I just point out to our entire council, including myself, reminding myself we do need to be very careful in any discussions or release of information, confidential information during closed sessions. And if it does go out, it will not be tolerated by this city council. So with that, again, I wanted to go public on this. I do want to give Mr. Grocott a chance, of course, to respond. This is just totally my opinion on this matter, but would like, again, to offer, if Mr. Grocott has anything to say, would welcome to do so. So please, Mr. Grocott.
Sure, I will do so. When we met in closed session and we discussed this item, it was actually in a two-part, because we met before the council retreat, and that's when we discussed making the appointment. Excuse me, and that was done in advance of the council retreat, because there was a desire for that person to know who they would be as acting city manager at the council retreat. And so that was done, and the promotion, if you can call it that, was accepted. And after in that closed session, it seems to me, once the doors even were opened and we were walking out, it was stated by one of the council members that we should also discuss, we would come back and discuss compensation. And so actually that, because the doors were open, that wasn't even a closed session item, that it was brought up as something potentially for further agenda of the council. And you're correct, then we met later and we discussed compensation for the acting city manager position, and we took action in closed session on that item. Now, when council takes action in closed session, there was no record kept of it. There was no, I don't even think we had an actual vote. It was more of a consensus item. But we did make a decision to spend the public's money. Now, to my knowledge, we don't have anything in our code or anywhere that discusses who necessarily reports out from closed session on an item. But in my opinion, and based on other experiences of discussing items like that, and I can give you examples, for instance, with with our fire chief when I was on the fire board. We had a similar situation where the chief wanted a certain package. We changed it, and immediately afterwards we reported out. My situation was talking to a reporter, and the subject came up, and I felt like it was an item that we had taken action on. We're spending the public's money. The public has a right to know that. And so, as you colored it, I think that's correct. It was early dissemination of the information, you might say, based on, maybe your desire to report out or the city attorney's. But I don't think it was, at that point, even privileged information because, again, we're spending the public's money. The public has a right to know. It's something we took action on, and the law simply states that those are reportable items, in my opinion. I'm going to move on though on this item because I am going to vote against it, and for this reason, as I met with the city with the mayor on this issue and pointed out to him that that in researching this, because the mayor offered to me to meet and talk about this whole situation, I went and took it upon myself to look at our city code on practices for this. And after reading the city code, I don't feel comfortable voting in favor of the action taken because, to me, there is a municipal code. It states pretty clearly how this ought to be done, and I don't think we followed it. I know folks could say, well, it's done all the time, or other cities do it. I don't know what other cities' municipal codes state, and we're, in my opinion, we're not above the law, and we can't act any differently than what the code allows for. Now, you may not like the code, you may not feel comfortable that it offers the council the proper ability to choose an acting city manager, but the code is what it says, and if we don't like it, then we ought to change it for in the future. And just quickly, I just want to run through this. It says that it's the city manager's authority to designate any employee to be acting city manager during his temporary absence or disability, and whether his vacation is during the middle of his employment or at the end, it doesn't specify. And so, in my opinion, reading this, it was his authority to name who would be acting city manager. It also says in our code that it is the duty of the city manager to appoint, remove, promote, and demote any and all non-elected employees of the city subject to applicable ordinances, rules, regulations, and directives of the council. Again, that points to the city manager doing that. Thirdly, it says it's the duty of the city manager to effect administrative reorganization of offices and so forth, and organize his staff. Everything points to him doing that. And then lastly, it's the duty of the city manager to prepare and submit a proposed annual budget and proposed employee compensation plans. And in this case, something is being done in terms of employee compensation. And so I feel like it should have been the city manager at least to make that recommendation, who he would appoint, if he was going to add any salary to it, and then we could approve that. The last thing, it does say that in the ordinance that in the event the city manager's absence or disability extends over a month's period, the city council may, after a 1-month period, appoint an acting city manager. Again, we may not like the way this is written. Maybe it's something we want to look at and change for this kind of situation, but it is what it is. It says what it does. And so if I had known this and read it myself in detail prior to our closed session, I would have voted and spoken against it in closed session. Didn't have that opportunity based on the timing of it, but knowing what I know now, I will vote no. And it's no disrespect to Mr. Maltby or even the $5,000. It's just I don't want to, be in that position.
Great. Thank you. Well, with that, let me, I do have one speaker card. Let me do that, and other council members are welcome to talk. But Bruce Renati has public comment on this. Hi, welcome. Again, if you keep your comments to about two minutes, we'd appreciate it.
Thank you. Let me expound on Mr. Grocott. because I too went and checked on what the city can do and can't do. And I found that this council and the city attorney are not in compliance with the laws of the state of California or the laws of the city of San Carlos. Let me make something to you. Since Mark Weiss is still being paid each pay period by the city as city manager until mid-December, he must still be the city manager. He's still an employee of the city. I'd like to know how the city can have a city manager, Mark Weiss, and an interim city manager, Jeff Maltby, at the same time. Interim city managers take effect between the pay date following the last city manager and the start of a new city manager. San Carlos will not need an interim city manager until Mark Weiss is finished being an employee in mid-December. Recruitment can start any time for a new city manager, but we can't have an interim one while we still have one. The city manager department's responsibilities, as stated in the proposed 2010-11 San Carlos budget, state that the assistant city manager also serves as the city manager in the city manager's absence. Being on vacation would be considered an absence, whether at the start, the middle, or the end of an employment period. Solutions. First solution, allow Brian Mora,
Please address City Council.
Brian Mora, to perform his duties as outlined in the city policy for an assistant city manager, and make Jeff Maltby interim city manager if and when Mark Weiss's employment is final in mid-December, with no need to pay bonus payments. Solution number 2, allow Brian Mora to perform his duties as outlined in the city policy for assistant city managers, and make Brian Mora the city manager when Mark Weiss's resignation is final. Since the city is outsourcing more and more functions, the position of assistant city manager could be eliminated with a budget savings of $250,000 to $300,000 in salary and benefits, as well as saving on the $5,000 bonus.
So,
thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much, Bruce. Okay. Anybody else like to speak on this item? Okay. Council, any thoughts before we take a vote?
Well, I have a couple of comments. I wasn't at the closed session that this was discussed, but I think there's 2 issues here, and I'd like to speak to the first issue. With all due respect, anything we talk about in closed session is at least advised by our city attorney, whether it has to do with money or not money, is supposed to be closed session. So it's very disconcerting to me that items are being discussed out before, in other words, they have to be reported out by the city attorney or by this council, and they're voted on, just like there are items on this agenda tonight that are being, or have been on the past. So that's one issue that's very disconcerting to me, that any of us would ever talk about something, no matter whether it's $1 billion or $5,000. There are certain things in the code, especially with labor relations and dollars, that the law says we have to talk about. Would we all like to talk about it in public? Certainly a lot of these items we might want to talk about, but the law precludes us from doing that. So I want to make, that's one point. Secondly, relative to interim city manager or whatever, again, we rely on council, and I'm not trying to throw this on you, Mr. Rubens, but we rely on council to explain to us what the different choices are that we have. And so I want to make sure that we're all on the same page on all of this. But there are 2 separate issues tonight, and I want to make sure that we talk about them. And Mr. Grocott brought up some items from the code, and that's all well and good. But the first issue I heard was very disconcerting to me. And again, I wasn't at the meeting that this was discussed at, but I would hope that any items that we discuss, no matter what dollar amounts there are, we'll keep in closed session until they're reported out, and will be reported out in open session, and have been since I've been on the council. So those are my only comments, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you very much. Mr. Klein?
Mr. Mayor, I'm going to echo what Councilman Grisilli said. I think there are 2 issues, and I do not want to lose sight of the first one. So I'll start with that as well. I believe closed session is the most frustrating thing we do as council members here because we say things behind closed doors, we take action behind closed doors, and the public isn't privy to that knowledge. You have the ability of a council member to say one thing behind closed doors and come up here and sing a completely different tune, but that's the game. We've agreed to that. We've all signed our code of ethics. You have to sign it when you get elected. We've all read it. We would hope we would have read it, and I'm very clear that things that are not reported out by the city attorney or the mayor are still in closed session, and they will get reported in due time, but there are reasons for that. We have labor negotiations, we have real estate transactions, we have 100 different types of things that we do in closed session that need to come out in proper time, and if they come out early, we do jeopardize many things, but the most important thing we jeopardize is the trust we have as council members to go behind those closed doors and discuss things in good faith. And it troubles me when we can skirt around the issues and say, well, it should have been reported or it shouldn't. It wasn't reported, and I don't believe it should have been reported, and that's my opinion, and I think we need to get an actual opinion on this. If I have not heard an apology, maybe that would have made my anger go down a little. There was no responsibility taken. I feel that we need a formal investigation of this, if to do anything but clarify the role of the city attorney and the mayor for reporting things out. I believe if there's that much confusion on it, well, then we need a formal investigation to find out what the rules actually are. That way this does not happen again, and if it does happen again, we can take some serious action, because it is very troubling to know that the things that are said behind those doors are not private anymore, that they are possibly public. And I will not go in there in confidence and be made cheap political points out of. I think that's disturbing, and I'm not okay with it. In regards to our appointment of an interim city manager, just like Mr. Grisilli, we rely on counseling. I am not a lawyer, so I would like to see what Mr. Rubin's understanding of the law is and to see if this is something we can do. I do not want to skirt the law. I believe we all have to play within the rules of the law, so I will wait for our counsel to tell us what we can do on that. But I am not a lawyer, so I can't weigh in on that.
Great, thank you. Vice Mayor Mott, any thoughts there from you?
Mr. Mayor, when we take our oath, among the things that we do try to uphold is the Brown Act. The Brown Act recognizes more than 15 specific items that can be discussed inside closed session. These are sensitive matters. Things that we deal with in closed session are dealt with in closed session because, among everything else, we want to maintain the city's bargaining position. Sometimes you're dealing with real estate, sometimes you're dealing with lawsuits. And the belief is that the public disclosure of these items at the inopportune time could cause harm to the city. I am personally disturbed, Mr. Mayor, that this is not an isolated incident. This has happened in the past, and I have spoken from this dais to state that I have been disturbed with breaches of confidentiality in closed session. The harm that I think that is happening here, our city manager is not here. He is on vacation, interim, whatever you want to call him. He is not here, and we are going to be hiring a new city manager. The harm that I think that has happened to the city is when we look at the applicant pool of folks who would look to San Carlos to potentially be employed by, they would have to look at the city council and go, can I say anything to the city council in confidence? Or is somebody going to go out and blab just because on a whim they've decided to interpret the law for themselves? I have a big challenge with that. I'm disappointed. I'll just leave it at disappointed. To echo Mr. Grisilli and Mr. Klein with relation to the appointment of interim, my initial reaction was it felt like a red herring argument that my interpretation, again, it's my interpretation. I don't have the initials JD after my name, so I will look over at council to give appropriate directions. But it sounds like temporary, if you're on vacation, the city manager can appoint this. This is not a temporary event for the previous city manager, Mark Weiss. He has announced his retirement and has left the building. That's not going to change. So the idea of when will a city manager be hired, we honestly don't know. Nobody on this dais can say, we're going to hire somebody in 6 weeks, 8 weeks. It could be 6 months. I don't know. But the tying of the hands of the council and the tying of the hands of how our staff can start to do the work that is important for the citizens of San Carlos, we need to get work done. This doesn't strike me as applicable in that position, and it strikes me that the council should have the discretion within the code to be able to make these kind of appointments. Again, I'm not an attorney. I'm going to look over at the guy that actually has the initials. But those are the two separate points, and I will keep them separate.
Okay, well, thank you all for your thoughts. Again, as mayor, my intention was to be open to the public, to notify council that it appeared to be a breach, and to move on. Just maybe a last comment or question would be to our city attorney. Anything else that I, as mayor, is my duties that I need to do, because it's very specific legality here on this situation here. Mr. Rubens, any recommendations?
Well, the code of conduct of the city lays out what the mayor's responsibilities are, and I think this is bringing up the subject in this forum is appropriate. You do have the authority to pursue an investigation, and then ultimately that could lead to another open session item where remedies are discussed as set forth in our code of conduct. I would like to, though, if I may, Mr. Mayor, touch on some of the comments that were made. I think there's a significant distinction between the term acting city manager and interim city manager. What we have now is Mark Weiss has retired. He put his notice before the city, and he is no longer at the city. He may be receiving some residual benefits, but he's no longer serving in the capacity as the city manager. The acting city manager is a different animal. That's designed for temporary absences. That's what our code is referring to, not a replacement where the city manager is not returning. And that's the situation we have here. The issue of the way that the payment is structured here for the interim city, the compensation, it's structured so it's paid at the end. And that was done to deal with the issue of not paying for something in advance. It was a council direction to structure the payment for, again, the additional time and responsibilities that are entailed in being the interim city manager. As it may not be evident to the public here, but the city manager is a much more time-consuming job than the administrative services director or even the acting city manager, because the responsibility lies with that position. They make all the decisions for the management of the city. And I think that's what you're recognizing when you're making this payment. It's interesting when people argue the semantics of the two positions, because I think the significance I can draw by this. The council had in its discretion to appoint a permanent city manager the day Mark Weiss left and announced his retirement. So by the logic that I heard earlier, that you couldn't appoint a new city manager until all the benefits ran out for Mr. Weiss, and that's not the case. You have the discretion to appoint an interim city manager, and the action that you took about a month ago was basically making that decision, so it was before that, as Councilman Grocott pointed out, before the planning retreat. The second decision that you had to make was whether or not you were going to offer some additional compensation. And those decisions are not made in closed session. Those decisions are made in open session. The salary component is made in open session. It was not reported out for that reason, because it was going to have to come out in an open session. And the reason for that is what we heard tonight. We heard the public questioning the compensation package. We have it provides a public forum to make that kind of decision, and that's why the law reads on the setting of the compensation. You can't do that in closed session. What you did do was you instructed a labor negotiator That's how it was agendized, and that's the proper way to agendize that. You instructed me to make a proposal to the candidate, which I did. And so that proposal was accepted, but the final decision has to be made in open session. So I think that I tried to answer all the issues that came up. If there's any other questions, I'd be glad to respond to those.
Mr. Mayor?
Please. Mr. Dodd?
Mr. Rubens, just so I can get it as simple as I can, was it within the legal right of the city council to appoint an interim city manager?
Yes.
Was it within the legal right of the city council of the city of San Carlos to offer a bonus payment to the interim city manager?
Yes.
Is the matter 7B before the city council of the city of San Carlos, 7E, is that a legal device that we can act upon lawfully tonight?
It is legal, and the council has done it previously in prior vacancies of the city manager position. It's a very similar process took place.
Thank you.
So just before we take the vote on this, though, I consider I did kind of one swirl here around the bucket in expressing some personal thoughts here. As Mr. Rubens has pointed out, my understanding is as mayor, I do have the authority to request a formal investigation. There'd be a staff report. There'd be an agendized item. We would vote on it. Disciplinary action could take place and so forth. That's a whole other swirl. It's a lot bigger swirl, but I heard one or maybe a little bit more of that. Again, I'm not recommending. I did what I thought is right here, but before we move on to this item, I want to make sure council is comfortable with my single swirl of action here. But any other comment? I wanted to make sure I gave all of council opportunity to make another recommendation.
Mr. Mayor, I would ask for staff guidance, and perhaps Mr. Rubin can make a report later on as the agenda permits, to clearly outline how materials from closed session are to be reported in open. Is that part of our guidelines or code of conduct?
It is, and I think that would be something we'd put on a future agenda.
Yeah, separate. Okay. Okay, unless I hear anything, then I'd like to ask for a motion.
Move approval of item 7E Echo.
Hear a second?
Second.
Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Great. Thank you all. Interesting discussion. Reports to council. We have two items on reports. We have an update on the police services and a second report on the library internal renovations. So start off with 8A, update on police department services to transition to the county sheriff's office. We have our chief, Greg Rothis, here this evening. Great, welcome.
Good evening, Mayor Royce, members of the City Council. Greg Rothis, Police Chief. I'm coming on as a series of periodic updates that we'll be doing on the police transition to the Sheriff's Office. And you have a staff report in front of you. So I'll just go over quickly some of the highlights on that report. First of all, the Bureau assignments have been made for the San Carlos Bureau. We've picked our personnel and a blend of Sheriff's Office personnel. We did some interviews of their people, and they have sent us some really outstanding people that are going to work in San Carlos, along with the outstanding people that we'll be having here at the Bureau. We have transition training plans in place. Our staff will be trained in the ways of the Sheriff's Office, and their staff that's going to come over here is going to be trained in the ways of San Carlos. So we have this mutual training going on. We've been very proactive with community outreach. I have attended Rotary Club meetings, Lions Club meeting. I have a chamber meeting I'm going to this week to present the Sheriff's Office plan, as well as a White Oaks neighborhood meeting again in October. Today the Sheriff and the Mayor and I did a videotape presentation on the transition plan that we can play on the website. So we're doing everything we can to get the word out to the public exactly how this is going to take place and to answer really some of their most common questions. Some new issues that have come up. First of all, there is a tentative date of a mass swearing in for all our people into the Sheriff's Office. That is November 1st, 10 or 10:30 in the morning. It is tentative, and as soon as we get that firmed up, I'll give you more details, but I wanted you to have that for your calendars now. Again, that's November 1st, the morning of November 1st, and that's intended to take place at the courthouse of the Hall of Justice. And then the other issue that's kind of new since the report came out is that when we were talking about vehicle markings, it was clear from us, from the council and the community, was that the look and feel of our police cars under the sheriff's program, they really wanted them to stay the same. Yet there was a simultaneous acknowledgement by the council that this is a partnership, and there was a need for the sheriff's office to reflect that on the vehicle. So I wanted to show you vehicles that the sheriff's office and the city have agreed on that really, we believe, meets both of those criteria. So let's see. First of all, you'll recognize that car. That is a San Carlos police car. That's the way they look now. You can see on the side it says San Carlos Police. You have the San Carlos Police star, and in the rear quarter panel, you can't see it very well, but it says People, Pride, and Professionalism, and those are the values of the San Carlos Police Department.
Usually when I see the car, the lights are flashing, I see the grill.
This is a friendly view. And this is the proposed vehicle, actually. You can see that there really is, in terms of the look and feel, there is no difference. The star has changed. If you read the star, it's different. It says the sheriff's office, whereas this other one said San Carlos. But it is still a 7-point star, right in the same location, same size. It looks a little different there because that's actually photoshopped. It's not real, but it will look much more like the star that you saw in the previous car. So it does maintain the look and feel, and it also acknowledges that this is a partnership. On the rear quarter panel, we couldn't Photoshop this in, but we'll take the People, Pride, and Professionalism off of that, and that's the sheriff's tagline up front. San Mateo County Sheriff's Office, a tradition of service since 1856, and that'll be on the quarter panel in the rear. On the trunks of the vehicles, or the police cars, it currently says San Carlos Police on the trunk lid, and it will continue to say San Carlos Police on the trunk lid. And there they are side by side. If you're kind of running down the street, it's going to be very hard for you to tell the difference between what the two cars are. So that's the update that I have right now. Be glad to take any questions from the council.
Questions? Any questions from council?
Well, while the chief's here, this doesn't have to do with the agendized item, but I hope he could come back at some point and report to us. And I'm sorry for taking up the time. I could have just emailed, but we did the unlawful ordinance very recently, and I've been hearing from police officers in town that the complaints have gone down, and I don't know if that has anything to do with the ordinance regarding to our bars and whatnot. And I was hoping we could get a report in the next couple months about how
we can certainly look at the before and after that. And
how it's working, and if it's true, or if it's just perception, whether or not the calls have been going down.
Okay.
Okay.
Do that.
Yeah, that's
Great.
it.
Anything else? Great. Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you very much.
Okay, now 8B, again, the second report to council, update on the library interior renovations.
Mr. Mayor, I'll handle this tonight. Christine
great.
Boland, City Clerk. Thank you. This is in response to a council member request and also a citizen request for an update on the library renovations. It's actually in the very beginning stages. As you know, we're one of 11 cities in a JPA, County Library JPA. The city owns and maintains the building, but the services are run by San Mateo County. So the library's coming up on 11 years, going to be 12 by the time anything's done to it, renovation-wise. But I did outline it in your report here, and I'll just mention that the library is going to be issuing an RFP for architectural services. It's going to be planned to be done in 5 different phases with stakeholder meetings, meetings with the Friends, meetings with city staff to find out what exactly the library needs. Similar cities that have done this are Foster City and Woodside. Actually, Portola Valley just got a whole new redo with private funds, so they won't be coming up on a renovation. But our library is getting a little bit worn, and after architectural services are concluded, and if the JPA decides to go forward with the renovation, it would include basically kind of a facelift, carpet, paint, shelving, and probably some reupholstering. So that's basically it in a nutshell. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Great. Thank you for your report. Questions?
Just a comment, because
Sure. Mr. Crocott.
the member of the public was concerned about, during these economic times, I think, as it was put, on spending money on the library renovations. It is something that is our rep to the library JPA. I had talked to the executive director about, who's in the audience tonight. Thank you. And I think part of the feeling, though, is that contrary to the public members' concern, it's actually a good time to be doing something like this because material prices and so forth are much more competitive, and you can get better deals than you might be able to when construction's going gung ho and the economy's roaring along. So it's it's actually a good time to be doing this and not a poor time.
Good. Any other comments or questions, Mr. Ahmad?
Just a quick question. This is the funds are not general funds.
These are not general funds. Actually, the library JPA would be spending their money for the architectural RFP. No city funds would be spent. There is currently a healthy maintenance fund on the library. So, as I understand it, all the proceeds from the rents from the library go into this maintenance fund. So we do have a fund available should a time come when we go through with these renovations. But again, it's a combination of JPA funds, mainly, Friends of the Library funds, donation recently received from the Hofer family, and then would be a little bit of city funds, which we don't even know what that amount would be until next year.
Great. Yeah, Mr. Mayor, it's often confusing when we're dealing with these pots of different funds. Folks think that maybe we're making a trade-off between critical services and doing something on the library. And I just wanted to bring that up, that what we're spending on the library or what is going to be spent on the library is not a choice between another critical service.
Great. Thank you.
Correct.
Okay. Thanks, sir. Good report.
You're welcome.
Okay, and we're moving on to item 8 on the agenda. These are public hearing items. There's actually 2 items.
9.
I'm sorry, 9. My eyes just watered, so 9 looks like 8. Public hearing, they're both regarding conditional use permits with some wireless facilities. 9A, let me quote here, it's consideration of conditional use permits pursuant to San Carlos Municipal Code Section 18.124 associated with 920 Buckland Avenue, 924 Buckland Avenue, and 260 Shelford Avenue in San Carlos. Deborah Nelson, Ms. Nelson, give us a staff report. Welcome.
Absolutely, I'm back.
A staff report of one of the very thick packages that you gave us last week. Thank you.
Yes, and I'll try to focus primarily on what's happened since your meeting on July 26th when you heard this as 5 separate public hearings, and we may decide that you still want to take 5 separate motions because the way we've structured this this use permit consideration of revocations of 4 existing use permits is to look overall at kind of general conditions as evidence for any actions you take on 4 separate use permits. So you continued the item a couple of months ago tonight with direction that we have a community meeting, and we did do that on August 23rd from 4 to 6 p.m., and I understand that some participants actually stayed for another hour afterwards. And we had providers from Verizon, T-Mobile, Sprint, Nextel, utility company representatives, PG&E, Comcast. I apologize publicly. I neglected to include AT&T, and it became apparent in that meeting that not only does AT&T provide service overhead on utility poles, but they also are the providers to the telecommunication companies themselves for the telecommunication equipment, and that there was earlier in August some work done by AT&T to pull some cable. So I did do a follow-up conversation with AT&T. Their work as they represent it is included in the minutes of the meeting, which is an attachment to your staff report, as are all the comments from that community meeting. Each provider and each utility company explained, and each property owner explained what their business is, how they conduct their business, how often they happen to be on the site. And there was an opportunity for community members to ask questions and offer feedback to the staff. The city attorney, myself, the building official, and our fire chief were all in attendance, also doing presentations of the business that we conduct on the site. Just for to give you a graphic representation, this is on a knoll in the northwest quadrant of the community at Shelford and Buckland Avenue. There are, as I just mentioned, AT&T, PG&E, Comcast, 2 water companies with tanks, and 3 telecommunication providers, as well as one facility that's a emergency radio facility shared by a number of the emergency providers in the county. As an overhead, this is a private property owned by Mr. John Strom. The Verizon facilities are on his parcel, and the original pole dates back to World War II era. This is the Cal Water property. Sprint Nextel is on this site, as is T-Mobile. And this is the Mid-Peninsula Water District, and the radio facility for the emergency providers are on that site. It came to us about this time last year. Actually, it's been kind of in the works since '07 in my experience here of noise complaints at the site. And so after some consideration, the city hired Illingworth and Rodkin, and Michael Thill in the front row is, you've seen him once before. He's here again to answer questions should you need them. So we did 2 readings. It was determined that both Verizon and T-Mobile are out of compliance if their equipment ran at night for some extended period of time. This is a little larger view of its representation in the neighborhood. This is Anchor Lane, and I think a number of the residents of Anchor Lane are here, we've had input from residents in this neighborhood near the T-Mobile, and also some input from residents on the other side. This was the actual test day in April. What we found as staff is that all this is pretty tough to negotiate because of the number of property owners, the number of providers, the number of utilities, and finding out who's in charge. Also, a number of the telecommunication facilities have contract workers that are up there doing work or getting the permits, and even with our conditional use permits, we don't always know who's in charge. So we've suggested additional conditions be added to the use permits. There's also a question of aesthetics. Some of the old use permits had certain aesthetic considerations of paint colors that have since changed. We are suggesting conditions that kind of clean that up. Also, the condition of the enclosures and the fencing and whether or not it is maintained on a regular basis. There's also questions that have come up about assuring compliance, and most recently at your public hearing in July and also at the community meeting is when there are these contract employees who come up to do maintenance work or change out equipment, what standards are they held to, and are they even advised that there are standards that the city has in its municipal code? And I think you recall the one about sort of employee health and safety when they're on the site at night, and whether or not they have sanitation facilities. We've added conditions in that regard as well. This is 924 Buckland. It is the public agencies facility. There is a equipment shelter. It is tested. It's only used in an emergency, which thankfully we haven't had one. And but it's tested monthly and also quarterly, and our code allows for that testing to occur without the noise ordinance applying in a rigorous way. These are some of the issues that were raised by the public, which you've seen be at your previous meeting. I think what came up also at the community meeting we had was this issue of when contract employees come to do work for any one of the providers or any one of the utility companies, or the utility company are hosting potential new providers for leases at the site, that there's people in and around the neighborhood. And if I might make an analogy to, if you're doing work at home, you might knock on the door and tell your neighbors that there'll be some construction work going on, or the Sears truck's going to come and deliver you a new appliance. We don't necessarily require that, and the work is much more disruptive in this particular neighborhood because it's they're commercial uses with industrial completely surrounding it. So we also have added some additional conditions to address this. So I'm just going to go through these quickly. That the providers have suggested that specifically for revocation, only noise applies, and it only applies to 2 of the providers. And you have in front of you a letter from T-Mobile that was delivered tonight that they've suggested that the noise does not apply, that they're in compliance. Verizon Wireless did change out some equipment, and I'll show you a picture of that in a minute, but there's a letter from them also. They now are in compliance with their new equipment. They're asking that there not be any additional conditions placed upon them. So these 4 additional conditions, since having seen this in July, to address one of the conditions talks about federal, state, and other municipal code provisions that apply specifically for parking, property maintenance, human health and sanitation, the FCC, those kinds of things. And that we want written verification back that the property owner knows that they're also responsible for upholding these conditions. And then secondly, regarding courtesy, as I mentioned, that when there is going to be work, particularly when it doesn't need a permit, but it's just change out and we're going to be there a while, city would like to know that a week ahead of time. And then we want, the condition suggests that those same people provide notice to the neighbors 3 days before they go to work at the site. And also that they create kind of a bulletin. And my analogy there is like Highlands Field. What we did with that was we said the various users of the field, there has to be a bulletin about how to use the field. So we want the telecommunication providers to take responsibility to do some kind of bulletin that says, this is what the city requires of you, subcontractor, when you go on that site to do any work. And we would approve that at a later date upon their submission. So should you choose to do 4 different or 5 different motions, the first one would be that you accept the overall testimony of both the public hearings. You left it open, so you're having a public hearing tonight, and that you're considering the documentation and evidence you had back in July and tonight, and that you're not going to take any action for revocation specifically or any use permit conditions for the public agency facility at 924 Buckland. And this would be your motion. Then I guess I'd look to you, Mr. Mayor, about whether you would like to open the public hearing now or have me go through each one of these specific use permits. It's mostly pictures.
What do you recommend? How long will that take?
That's just probably another 5 minutes, so I can run through these quickly.
Sure, I think.
So this is the Verizon facility. It is also 9B, which we'll get to later, but for 9A, it's an existing monopole. I'm sorry, I went too fast. Wood monopole. It has antenna on it. Some of these facilities will be removed, specifically this one, and I would have them tell us what others, but that's an existing facility these are the old cabinets that were there that were 3 dBA over our noise requirements. These are the new cabinets, look essentially the same, but you have in front of you also a letter from Verizon and a noise test done by Illingworth and Rodkin that was submitted to you tonight that says they're in compliance. So fencing would not be required for noise attenuation. This is the condition of some existing fence. It doesn't look that well kept, but it's not required for noise attenuation. So in this case for Verizon, we've asked that you amend or add a condition 9 that the Planning Commission added a couple of years ago, and add conditions 10 through 25, which address the issues I've talked about before regarding noise and aesthetics and just maintaining the property in a neighborly fashion. And that would be your recommendation, which is to approve the amended conditional use permit by adopting attachment 2 to your staff report. This is the T-Mobile facility. There's actually 2 conditional use permits for this one. It is painted a different color than was originally approved. We're suggesting it be painted again. These equipment boxes have tested slightly noisier. You do have a letter tonight that says T-Mobile believes they're in compliance. It's more of the equipment box. Once again, you're going to amend one condition and add conditions 8 through 23, and this would be your motion, and that would be attachment 2. The previous one was attachment 1. And then you would make the same kind of motion on the second T-Mobile conditional use permit. There was one in the 90s, and then there's one for 2009, and you would amend that conditional use permit as well. Then regarding Sprint Nextel, this is the facility at the Cal Water site. They have equipment boxes, which I think they refer to them as Whisper. They tested in compliance, so there's no recommended change for noise attenuation. But we have, actually Cal Water has a radio facility right here I wanted to show you. But there are no recommendations for noise attenuation, but there are recommendations for aesthetics, just like the other use permits. So they all look very similar, and they are a standard we would like to impose from here on. Then you would make a recommendation. Your motion for for Sprint Nextel would be to adopt attachment 4 with those changes to the use permit. So that concludes my presentation on the whole of the issues, and I'm available for comments, and as I mentioned, Michael Thill from Illingworth and Rodkin may also answer questions.
So let's first get any questions from council, and we'll open it up as the public hearing, and I have a few speaker cards. Anybody else would like to speak on this item would be welcome, and we'll bring it back to council for discussion and voting. So first with that, any questions, council?
I was just Ms. Nelson, basically what we're trying to do tonight is basically codify all these parcels and all these facilities and basically treat them all the same.
That's correct.
Right. So I just want to make sure that people understand what we're trying to do here. There may be 8 to 23 on one or 9 to 24 on others, so that if this happens in the future, and gosh knows it probably will, we have standard operating procedures for the way we operate on this stuff.
Right. Even the obvious is made clear. I mean,
Okay.
we do impose our codes.
In a way, we're trying to simplify it.
Yes.
But unfortunately, it's a bit complicated the first time out. From
Correct.
now on, it should be a lot more simpler.
Correct.
Okay. Because I'm already confused, but that's okay. I know what I have to do here. I hope I won't be making the motions because I can't even find them. But anyway. So, but again, I wanted the public to understand what we're trying to do. If we approve these, we're trying to accomplish a consolidation so that we have standard operating procedures.
Yes.
Good. Thank you.
I just had a question about, we got 2 documents, actually 3 or 4, but anyways, on this particular item, on 9A, we got 2 letters from Verizon Wireless. Now, perhaps they'll address these a little bit more, but it's very difficult when we come up here, you sit down and you get 2 letters. So I'm just looking for when might you have gotten these? When did staff get these? And do you have any comments on them?
Yes. The letter that refers and has attached the noise evaluation, I did not have the letter and the actual evaluation write-up at the time the staff report was distributed, but it occurred the day before. So I was able to put a paragraph in the staff report which explained that they're now in compliance. That then arrived the day that staff reports went out, so too late to get in on e-packets. The other one arrived Friday, which is all of the comments on specific conditions, and the Verizon representative is here, and perhaps he'd like to respond to those. Thomas Miller.
So if I can summarize, on the first one, there's not much of an issue because it's just on the noise thing, and that was in our staff report.
Right.
But on this second one, we'll hear from them perhaps.
It has been a theme to comment, but the providers have commented on the level of detail within these additional conditions, and I think there's been a theme that says you should really, the city should only be addressing those conditions which are really related to the noise attenuation measures, should those be required. So they've been consistent in saying don't add other conditions.
Great. Any other questions?
That's it.
Okay, open the public hearing. I have 4 speaker cards, but again, if anybody else would like to speak, just complete one of these. Come on up here. We have, I get queued up here, Tom Miller and Frank Hensley, Orrin Laney. Maybe let's go in that order. Tom, welcome. Again, try to get a couple minutes. I'll stop you by 3, so somewhere around there. Thank you. Tom, welcome.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, council members. Tom Miller, Verizon Wireless. As reported by staff, I've submitted specific responses to the proposed conditions to staff. I've also submitted them for the record tonight. I'm not going to speak to each one. If you have questions, I'm happy to try to answer them. But I'll make 3 brief comments. Per the recent acoustical report from Illingworth and Rodkin, the Verizon facility at 920 Buckland complies with the city's noise guidelines. Few, if any, of the issues raised by the neighbors in previous hearings have been specific to Verizon Wireless or our facility at 920 Buckland. We have worked with the city to address the original noise complaint, which I think was the purpose of the city's action and which I think you're acting on tonight. While we were not implicated in Mr. Opelenik's original complaint, per the noise study from Illingworth and Rodkin, we have taken steps to bring our facility into compliance with city code. We therefore request that the city council refrain from amending our permit on issues unrelated to noise or to our operation at 920 Buckland, or in ways that will significantly impact our ability to provide service to area residents, businesses, and emergency service providers. And that concludes my comment. Thanks.
Great. Thank you very much, Tom. Frank Hensley, Frank, welcome.
Good evening. My name is Frank Hensley. I'm the property owner at 250 Shelford, right next door to the 260 Shelford. I actually have done a little bit of research. I actually was going to present a few things, but I think I'll just make a few brief comments, and that is the majority of the towers, which are presided over by the FCC, have to be registered by the FCC and are publicly available, and you can do research on them. I actually have done that research. There's 7 registered towers and/or antenna structures on the 3 sites that are in question. 2 of the registrations have been canceled for one reason or another. They're old. They've been since torn down and replaced. The reports, unfortunately, don't provide any of that information. The interesting thing is that on the majority of these reports, there's incorrect information or information that is not 100% accurate. As an example, Mr. Strom's site lists a tower listed in the city of Belmont as opposed to being listed in San Carlos. But yet the contact address is indeed San Carlos, and it's the correct address. I'm sure it's an oversight. I'm not pointing him out. Even the city of San Carlos's towers are not listed as being on this site. The GPS coordinates are actually slightly off. My whole point with this is that there's a number of little inconsistencies all the way across the board. There's been some questions as to whether or not there have been building permits. To the best of my knowledge, we have yet to see any of the building permits that were done at the Sprint site. I'm just encouraging the city to not vote on this tonight and or to extend the conditional use permits until such time that the city ordinance, which currently has a lot of holes in it, can be brought up to snuff. And that's my comment.
Great. Thank you very much, Frank. Okay, Orrin Laney and then Paul Atherton. Hi, welcome.
Good evening. I have just a handful of slides, if I can plug it in.
So, are these PowerPoint or PDF? What do you, PowerPoint, okay.
Do you see yours up there?
No.
Mr. Mayor, should we skip to another speaker until we can get this done?
Yeah, let me see what's happening here.
You may, please.
Hey.
Which document would you like?
Okay. Shelford Buckland, 27 September, on the right, in the middle. Correct.
Great, now we get the whole world.
Yeah.
Okay. I shall go through these quickly. Here's a quick overview of the problem. My feeling is that the neighborhood is not against cellular providers. It's an acknowledged public good. Most of the other points here have been covered elsewhere, so I won't dwell on them. I come here to speak of solutions that aren't highly technical and pivoting on small minutia. I like to take a bigger view. Basically, the cellular providers, in the face of growing demand for service, have used virtually all of the prime industrial and commercial sites. So now they're pushing into residential neighborhoods. They are using equipment which is largely designed for industrial and commercial places. So we are getting noise complaints. We have an ordinance based on A-weighted measurements. I have suggested previously that this is inadequate, but I won't dwell on that. Here's something I ran across. I've been around broadcast and so forth, and it's a common paradigm for me to discover, to expect, I should say, that towers are sited on lots big enough such that if the tower were to fail, they would not exceed the boundaries of the sites. And here are a place in Virginia, a city in Minnesota, and then Mendocino County, California, showing typical setback requirements. The California minimum is really rather small, but these towers are in a location which is not Vermont granite, but former seabed. It's weak and crumbly, and we are in a seismic area. So I just point that up as another area where the city and indeed the California codes seem inadequate. A lot of my concern is a creeping power footprint. Originally, we had the water tanks, and then we added the fire and safety, and the neighbors, to my feeling, readily accept these. is part of their neighborhood because it is part of their civic duty to do so. Once the cell companies came in, they initially had modest footprints, but they keep growing. So what originally was 0 was, about 1,000 watts, and then thousands, and now it's somewhere in the tens of thousands, which equals or exceeds the surrounding houses. The potential with all the antenna load that's intended for there is that you could get upwards of 100 kilowatts, which is industrial scale.
So, Warren, if you could start to summarize here your presentation, or
Certainly.
More slides, great, thank you.
Okay, here's the essence of the matter. Equipment providers have addressed this problem. They've gone green. This tower to the left is the new type of cellular base station that is now available. You can see it's aesthetically superior, but the most important thing is that it's energy efficient, which holds down the power footprint, and they do this partially by going to fanless design, which saves about 20 to 30%. That's about how much is spent just on cooling with the old equipment.
So again, if you could summarize maybe one more slide or summarization.
All right.
I need to move on here.
Yeah, you can see a progress from huts to cabinets to entirely tower-mounted equipment. Here's some of the major providers. They have remote radio heads and fanless design. With a remote radio head, that is the item that only needs the tower. It can be up to 20 kilometers from the main equipment.
So your last summarizing statement would be what?
Well,
please.
If the city of San Carlos will adopt, or mandate, I should say, appropriate technology for residential neighborhoods, all noise complaints will go away, the power footprint will be green, and you'll set a good example for the rest of California.
And one quick question. I see the city residence is Santa Clara, so what is your relationship or your purpose here in
I've been invited here by a resident who is very interested in this issue.
Okay.
I'm using
you're invited guest. You answered my question. Thank you very much. Just wanted to know that. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Hey, Paul?
Good evening, Mayor Royce, members of the council, Paul Albritton, outside counsel for T-Mobile. I want to be very brief and just give you a quick chronology. T-Mobile's had that facility since 1996. It's been there for 14 years without any formal noise complaint until currently. In October last year, 2009, an additional conditional use permit was granted for T-Mobile to upgrade its facility. T-Mobile came in, and at the time there was a condition added saying that acoustics would be tested after the upgrade was completed. November of last year, T-Mobile came in with a building permit, which included installing noise dampers onto the new equipment that was being installed. An October acoustic analysis of last year showed that the T-Mobile facility was in compliance at the time. As you know, there was a great deal of discussion in the Planning Commission, which began this revocation proceeding in January of this year. And it was only after the June Planning Commission meeting that T-Mobile was allowed to go forward and actually install the dampers onto its facility, which it's done actually since June. The testing that was done before the dampers were put on said that theoretically the facility could exceed the current noise ordinance at night. It did that by saying that T-Mobile actually is the most quiet facility up there. It's 7 feet from a property line, and your ordinance looks at the property line for measuring acoustics. It was at 48 dB at the time. It said because of a certain tonal quality, which we questioned, there was a 5 dB deduction. Took it down to a 40 dB requirement, 5 feet away. We believe that we're in compliance, but question that tonal requirement. 40 dB, if you can imagine 7 feet away, is extremely quiet. It's more quiet than at any time in this room, even from the fan, from the projectors that you're hearing. So T-Mobile believes it's in compliance. At the same time, it's been working with the neighbors, discussed with the neighbors a possible fence design. It's actually brought color samples out to the neighbors to talk to them about what color the pole they would like to have, and would like to be a good neighbor. It is difficult. We had AT&T bringing in fiber, and there was a concern that they had to come out so many times to put that fiber in. It's difficult for, believe it or not, T-Mobile to control AT&T when it comes out to put, I don't know if you've ever ordered phone service for your home, but you know it's the sort of thing where it's difficult to control. T-Mobile would like to comply in spirit and intent with the types of conditions that you've suggested here. They want their contractors to comply with local codes. They want to be a good neighbor. At the same time, this whole process was based on this apparent or theoretical acoustical violation, and we don't think that that revocation process was justified, nor the addition of these conditions based on that process. So I'd like to just conclude by saying T-Mobile is willing to perform with the spirit and intent of these conditions. But if push came to shove and you came to revoke T-Mobile's permit because it had failed to give advance weekly notice of a maintenance project, we would obviously fight that and fight it legally. And that is with respect to this entire revocation process, as we would if you were to proceed and revoke. So I want to make that simple legal point, but confirm that T-Mobile has been meeting with the neighbors, intends to meet with the neighbors, and intends to try and do its best to be a good neighbor, given the constraints of having to work with subcontractors and other contractors as time goes on. This facility's been there 14 years, and I would fully expect it to be there another 14 years because of the demand for wireless services in the area. Thank you very much. Answer any
Thank you, Paul.
questions.
Thank you. Good. Anybody else like to speak on this topic? Please, come on. Randall? Brian Randall? How you doing tonight?
Good evening, gentlemen. It's good to see you again.
Yeah. Good to see you too, Brian.
Thank you. Who said that?
I did.
Thank you. I came to a city hall meeting a month ago and for the first time heard of the noisy equipment on the San Carlos Hill. Something sounded very wrong about all this. I did speak up at that time, and I said I would visit the site, and I have done that. And this is my report. I looked for the hill on Google Earth and went up unannounced one quiet evening and followed noise straight to the Verizon cabinets. I found the problem within 5 minutes of arrival. The noise was caused by fans inside the Verizon cabinet, which were pushing large volumes of air out at 100-degree temperatures. I measured the temperature. If those cabinets were in my house, they would heat it all year long. That Verizon equipment has been, and still is today, the reverse of green technology and should be removed. Past and present records show they have been out of compliance for years, causing many complaints, but no citations or fines resulted. My conclusion is that our planning department has not been protecting the rights of our citizens and have constantly favored the antenna companies. Thank you all very much.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Anybody else? Welcome. Come on up. If you haven't completed a speaker card, if you could do so right after, that would be great.
There should be one up there. Okay. Michael Apollonik, Anchor Lane.
Okay. Great.
Mr. Mayor, council members. The last decade has not yielded improvements in the establishment, development, and placement of personal wireless providers' infrastructure in the city of San Carlos. Especially on the properties known as Shelford and Buckland, a residential area has become a cluttered commercial zone. Complaints have caused excessive load on city staff and many disgruntled residents. We cannot undo past errors and indiscretions such as excessive noise, construction with no city permits, and loose enforcement. However, we can move forward to realize a unique opportunity with the new City of San Carlos comprehensive zoning ordinance update that is being formulated and due for approval in summer of 2011. The residents of San Carlos have been told repeatedly that cellular infrastructure is mandated by the federal government and the Communications Act of 1996, and there is very little city staff can do. Not so. There is much the city and staff could do through zoning and as other California cities have done to protect the integrity of their communities. As a stakeholder in the zoning process, I have talked directly with the zoning consultant on having a two-tiered noise ordinance because of the diverse topographical area of San Carlos. I have also provided your consultant with examples of antenna ordinances from other California cities that could vastly improve planning and building procedures for wireless service providers both on public and private lands in our city. According to your consultant, both zoning changes are doable. These changes alone will alleviate many of the problems the residents currently face. In addition, with the availability of green equipment for wireless providers, the city of San Carlos is in a prime position to mandate quiet, fanless, and low energy consumption wireless sites. If the City Council were to embrace green technology, new comprehensive updated noise and antenna ordinances, that should guarantee the residents that the future development of personal wireless providers will be managed properly. As a wireless technology moves rapidly, the City of San Carlos needs to be aggressive in zoning properly for its placement and operation. Let's only extend the Buckland and Shelford conditional use permits just till the new zoning ordinance become effective next summer. Thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you very much, Mike. Okay. I have Mike Nicolopoulos. I'm sorry, Samuel Nicolopoulos.
Correct.
Yeah, because I know a Nicolopoulos. That's the only reason I was able to say it.
Is that right? Good for you.
Welcome.
Mayor and council members, I want to speak about a noise issue I've had at 7 Anchor Lane, and Ms. Nelson is privy to this because I gave her a scenario about a thing called the Phantom Roar. I have no idea what provider it is, but here I go. I purchased my home in June of 1965, and I'm an original owner in the area of the Shelford Buckland municipality properties directly behind me. I purchased my property and continue to live there in this location because of the tranquil and beautiful nature of the canyon, the hill environment that San Carlos has. However, over the last 14, 15 years, my quiet, beautiful neighborhood has been invaded by wireless providers that have little respect for the area. The wireless providers have erected ugly structures that are an eyesore, create a noisy environment that was once the quietest area in the city of San Carlos. The wireless providers do not seem to care what they do on the hill properties and how it affects the neighborhood. During a recent Planning Commission meeting on the current noise problem, I publicly asked the Planning Director, Ms. Nelson, what can be done if the noise that was waking up neighbors at night and coming from the Buckland and Shelford sites could not solve under the current city laws. Ms. Nelson says that the current laws that we have will be adjusted, state will be adjusted and correct the problem. I'm holding her to that statement. With that said, I'd like to see the city council make sure that our neighborhood be returned to its original, tranquil, quiet nature regardless of the noise sources. In addition, this is the time for the city council to update our local laws to protect all neighborhoods in San Carlos and allow for an orderly and planned installation of wireless technology. The future will bring even more complex technologies that want a place in San Carlos. Let's get the proper rules and guidelines in place now. Thank you so much.
Great. Thank you, Samuel. Great. Anybody else would like to speak on that? I do. I have a speaker card on 9B. Michael? No? He's on 9B. Okay. Anybody else on 9A? Yeah, come on, please. Welcome.
Hi, my name's Alan Durson. I live at 239 Shelford Avenue. I've been into all these hearings and stuff, and I just have to ask the City Council one question. What is the monetary gain to the City of San Carlos to allow these cell sites in a residential neighborhood?
So we're here to listen to comments and not answer questions, so please proceed.
Okay, I'll wait until I can ask that question later.
Okay, great, thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this item? Okay. Here, a motion to close the public comment?
Move to close public hearing.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay. Discussion? City Council?
Actually, I'd like to get a couple of clarifying questions.
Sure. Great. Mr. Mott?
Ms. Nelson, there were a whole bunch of motions in front of us, and there was a discussion about updating ordinances. So up here, we sort of understand the shorthand. I want to make certain that everybody understands what's in front of us. What are the motions, and is there an updated ordinance in front of us tonight?
The motions are to amend existing conditional use permits from 1996, 1998, 2007, 2009. Those are, those cellular providers have vested rights in those use permits. The city attorney might want to further comment, but we are looking under our revocation process whether or not there is a need to amend any of those conditions or add to them, and that's what's before you tonight. We are also doing the comprehensive evaluation of the city's zoning ordinance. We're well into that. As Mr. Opalanik mentioned, we have had stakeholder interviews, and he was helpful to provide input. And we will be looking at those other ordinances that other communities have adopted. Those will not apply retroactively unless you choose so to existing conditional use permits. They would apply to new applications.
Ms. Nelson or Attorney Rubens, you use the term vested rights. What does that mean?
May you, Greg?
Well, in a general rule is once a use permit is granted and building permits are issued, the applicant or property owner has a vested right. Example outside the world of antennas would be if someone came to the Planning Commission to build a apartment building in San Carlos. Once they met all the requirements for the city, if a use permit or other approval is required, once they met all the city requirements, then the ministerial act that would follow would be the issuance of a building permit, and that issuance is what triggers vested rights under California law. So in these cases, we have a package of vested rights that are subject to our municipal code regarding approval and revocation or modification of use permits. So that's why you have this before you. It's under our code, any use permit is subject to revocation or modification. And I think that might answer your question, is where we are procedurally.
Again, we deal with some complex things up here, and we tend to speak in shorthand, and this is an issue of great importance to the neighborhood. I want to make certain everybody understands what's in front of us and what are we doing. Mr. Rubens, and Ms. Nelson, what I have heard this evening is, and previously and for quite some time, issues of noise, issues of workers going up, messes, etc. Now, these conditional use permits, are we changing how the noise is supposed to be dealt with in the motions that we've got tonight?
No, only that it be attenuated to the code that is currently in place, which is very similar to many Bay Area cities. It's based on the A-weighted dBA scale.
And Mr. Rubens, I think in a previous conversation, you and I had spoken about the fact that workers are going up there. This causes disruption in the neighborhood, and to some extent, there's a nuisance involved. Is that something that we can address in an upcoming ordinance?
Well, yeah, we haven't. Our ordinances, many of the ordinances declare certain activities as nuisances, and we certainly could look at, and I think our current noise ordinance declares that anything above the standard is considered a nuisance. So we could do that and make sure that it's included in, and I think it's probably going to be included in many of the provisions of our new ordinance.
If I might, having had these conversations with the building official that is responsible for our property maintenance ordinance, the coming and going, like I described, when in your personal household work that you have done or deliveries you have made, the construction hour noise limits would apply, but people coming to your front door and ringing the doorbell and having a conversation in your yard, which can be heard by your neighbors, is not something that would be under a nuisance definition in our code. So we said, well, this is what happens. This is the nature of these utility sites and the uses that are on them, and that's why we've suggested sort of these courtesy measures that be adopted.
And Councilmember Ahmad, the one distinction is the distinction between a public and a private nuisance. And two neighbors who are arguing over noises and activities that are particular to those two properties that are affecting each other only, those would be more like a private nuisance. Private nuisance can be anything from noise to earth movement or there's a lot of different things that could be considered a private nuisance. But a public nuisance, that's what you'd be declaring in when a violation occurs under our municipal code. We're really declaring that to be a public nuisance.
I'll yield for the moment.
Okay. Well, can I ask maybe one question? Our city manager, a question came up on the revenue side. I think you might be able to like to expand that and just give an overview of the revenue and our costs associated. It doesn't have to be figures, but just an overview of the flows there with these facilities.
Well, to the best of my knowledge, the city doesn't generate any revenue based on these facilities. The water district may, and likely does, and I believe a private residence does as well, but the city does not.
Okay. And are there any costs associated from the city in providing?
Well, any code enforcement costs that would be associated, any normal, regulatory cost of these hearings and the conditional use permits and those types of things, anything that we don't recover would be a cost.
Great. Okay. Thank you very much. Okay. Other comments, Mr. Grocott?
I had a couple of questions. The first one is, and these are based on some of the public comment. Mr. Opelnik suggested extending the use permits only until the summer when our zoning update will take place. Is that possible to do? Or is it, you had mentioned that we could also, when we do the updates, I guess, write them in such a way that they would apply to these use permits?
These particular use permits did not have any kind of time limit on them. And again, I would ask the city attorney, but I do not see that there's a mechanism with this revocation process to then impose a time frame on these use permits.
That's correct. I think the time limit is what I think is being asked for is that you defer action on this, and I may be wrong on that, but I think that's probably your only option is to defer action on the revocation proceeding if the council's desire is to have before it any new zoning ordinance update. That'll take some time because once the proposed zoning ordinance comes before you next summer, it still won't be effective for 30 days after that. And so if the council's comfortable in having the current permits remain in effect until then, that I think would be appropriate. Placing a time limit on these use permits, I suppose the most you could do would be to put a permit on the additional conditions over and above the original conditions. But even that, I think, might be difficult because of the vested rights issue.
Well, hearing what the speaker said, I think the intent would be is that, generally, like in my business, you design a house and you have certain setbacks, yard setbacks. And 20 years later, the Planning Commission, at the advice of the staff, changes a yard setback from, well, it's happened here, from 3 feet to 5 feet, right? So if you have a house that's 3 feet, well, you're grandfathered in. Any new stuff you do, applies to the new code, but if you're not touching anything, your existing structure is grandfathered in, correct, Deborah?
Yes.
And so I think what the speaker is saying is we're not too far away from updating our zoning code. What a shame it would be to update the zoning code and then all this stuff is grandfathered in. I think that's what the concern is. And so the question is how to avoid, since we're so close to changing the zoning code, how do we avoid grandfathering in these sites with the old code when we'll be updating to the new code?
Well, and the city attorney and I haven't had this brief discussion, so we might be doing this back and forth, but
Yeah,
my
that's okay.
understanding of adopting new codes is just as you said, that the facilities that are built on under an existing code are legal non-conforming unless you choose in your new code to put some amortization period by which time they have to be conforming with the new code.
Okay.
And so that will be a decision that you can discuss next summer when you adopt new telecommunication portions of the zoning ordinance. In the meantime, it's still a year away, and you could choose to adopt new conditions as part of this revocation consideration.
And then following on that, and related to it, I was really interested by this gentleman's presentation, even though he was asked to go through it quickly. I suppose when the zoning code's being updated, that's when things, as he was suggesting, would be applied, where we could mandate new technology and technology. I agree with him. You know,
Yeah.
we need technology that's more appropriate to these residential areas. It does, as you
Right.
I think would admit. This is commercial stuff in a residential neighborhood. It's a problem.
And a number of the conditions that we have added, we have looked at some of the communities that Mr. Opalanik mentioned before. Glendale and San Diego has a really wonderful stealth, even incorporated into architecture of buildings. And in the city of Berkeley, San Rafael. So we've looked at some of the very recent ones to the degree to which we can include conditions now under our existing ordinance we have. And as we look at new ordinances, we'll bring the latest and the greatest before you.
Okay. So I would just suggest to the mayor, I don't want this discussion to get lost. You know, some of us could change, staff could change, but we still have these people who have owned their homes for a long time and probably will into the future. Let's not lose track of this particular item of appropriate technology for a residential neighborhood, and that when we do the new zoning, maybe we do have something in there that says, you know, you're fine as you are with your old technology for a certain period of time, but you do have to update and meet and come into compliance with new technology, new code.
Mm-hmm. Good. Mr. Chair, can I ask a question? I get confused with vested rights. What requirement do they have to do that? It's like my house. If you have a new ordinance that says you have to have sprinklers in your house if it's over 2,500 square feet or if it's over 30 years, I don't believe you can come into my house and make me do that. Or maybe you can, but not you personally.
Well, traditionally, what has happened is when there's a code change, uniform building code change is a great example. It changes all the time, every few years.
We've had that, yeah.
I remodeled my kitchen recently, and I had to completely replace all the electrical in the kitchen because it was so old.
But I did remodel mine, so I don't have to.
But it's when you come in for the building permit is what gives the city the right to apply the new code. So in this instance, if we have a new antenna application or a modification to the antenna, that would give us the right to
do it.
Apply the new code.
But if there is no change, if T-Mobile or Verizon or any of these folks just go, we want to use 2010 technology or whatever technology that's built in there, 1987 technology, if they don't want to come in and change it, none of these new ordinances that we may come up with is going to affect that.
Well, there are some.
Or is it?
There are some ways to do it, but it's going to require amortization of the uses, and it would require some study to see if we can apply it to antenna structures.
Right. I just want to make sure that we're all on the same page here. Just because we pass a new ordinance doesn't mean that somebody's going to require that all these folks have to come in and change their operation.
Yeah. But there's a distinction in some of the issues that are brought up. Is there's the vested rights for land use.
Right.
There's also the other quality of life measures that we still would have the purview. Our noise ordinance, if that's something that the council wants to look at and update, that would still be, the new rule would apply. Because that's not a land use decision. That's a public safety police power issue for the city. So there's two different issues here. The land use issues are vested rights. The public nuisance or quality of life issues, you still have some purview. And then the way it comes before you again is the use permit requires compliance with the city's codes. So we do have a way to impose quality of life, but we don't have a way to take away a vested right to the land use. The land use is an antenna and associated equipment.
Through the chair, if I may.
Sure. Mr. Grocott?
I'm following what Mr. Grisilli is saying, and I agree with, when you own a house, it's your property, and as long as you're, doing there what's within the law and so forth, you're perfectly fine. What I heard from what you said, putting it in layman's terms, is this isn't straight out ownership of property. It's leasing, number one, and number two, it's under a conditional use permit. Therefore, there are conditions on the use of the property, and that's where we have some purview, including amortization of the use, as you put it.
Well, we'd have to do that by ordinance, but the amortization, but the ability to regulate the use permit is in our code, and in this case, it's based upon noise and other issues that have arisen on the site that have been demonstrated in the record.
Including, we can touch on aesthetics.
Aesthetics are definitely within your purview, except in this case, the approval that you've already given is really the antenna structure. I think on this revocation proceeding, I think that might be outside of your purview because that's the essential use we're talking about.
Okay. And then, Mr. Mayor, I did not finish my questions,
Please, go ahead.
and so I just have one more, and that is, no, that's okay. It was said a couple of times, I think, by the wireless companies that they seem to be pointing to revocation based on noise, and that's it. And yet, I think the neighborhood has felt like there's other issues, and that's why we see other issues in the conditional use permit that we're, as was said earlier, we're trying to make a level playing field here for all the sites. Could somebody please explain that? Because I'm hearing two things. Obviously from the cell companies, I'm hearing it's only based on noise, and I think I'm hearing from the neighborhood and from city staff, no, it goes beyond just the 45 dB and noise issue.
Well, in any public hearing process, I think the public has an opportunity to bring up other concerns that it started out as noise and also activity. I think early on the cumulative effect of all of these providers up there it's been brought to the council's attention that there are other issues besides the equipment noise that are going on related to the use permits. I think the idea of creating the level playing field, so to speak, is so that staff and the public and the providers all basically have the same rules that they're going to be operating under on this very intensively used site. I mean, there's many antennas there and many different providers, and we may get more applications for this site. We have the appeal that's later for a new antenna on the site, and there may be others in the future. So we're trying to develop a procedure that'll deal with antennas going forward, not just on this site, but in other sites in San Carlos. Many of these issues, as Ms. Nelson brought up, are things that we've looked at other ordinances, and we've seen what other municipalities are imposing. So we're kind of looking ahead to what might be in our ordinance and trying to through the use permit process, address these issues. And I think that's how we're trying to handle it really in the big picture.
Thank you.
Good. Other questions?
All my questions are taken. So,
Mr. Mond or Mr. Casella?
Yep.
So, Ms. Nelson, do you want to? You have some slides there of each of the resolutions. You want to take us through in some order on each of these?
Mr. Mayor, could I just make a general comment before, because this will feed in. A couple things I wanted to bring up. One, I'm looking forward to a good, strong ordinance about how we deal with towers. As much as we have heard from the community this morning, this evening, boy, it's been a long day. It started with a dentist, and he was playing Bee Gees. It was just miserable.
Aren't they Australian? I just came from Australia.
Yeah. The drill, the Bee Gees. The challenge that we have is that folks are saying that this is industrial equipment being placed in a residential neighborhood. One of the things that I think we need to be aware of is the people who are moving into these neighborhoods are not getting landlines. I think of anybody that I know, probably on this side of the dais, I don't know anybody who called up AT&T or the local phone company and said, hey, could you put a phone in here? They're using their mobile. We're seeing landline use going down 6 and 8% per year. People are using their mobile phones. They are not getting a phone in their house. So as we start to see people moving into San Carlos, we will see cell phone usage going up. That's point number one. So I'm looking forward to a very strong ordinance with very good aesthetics and good, strong technology goals. I would not support specific technology choices any more than I would tell Verizon to use TDMA as opposed to CDMA, but we can set goals to say this is what your energy efficiency needs to be. Point number two, with relation to nuisance. One of the things I am concerned about, people always hear about dropped calls. How many do you drop? There are lawsuits that go in here. The FCC looks at this. There's something I would like to tie in, and I'm giving this as sort of advance notice to the cellular companies that I'm going to be looking at this. Most of the time people are talking about how many nines they get for service. We're 99.9% up. You expect your electricity to be on almost 100% of the time. When it comes to cell phone reception, we're kind of used to crud. Good folks at Verizon, it looks like you only drop about 1.5% of your calls. Sprint, about 2.5%. T-Mobile, you're coming up around 3%. AT&T, almost 5%. Now, if I translate that to outages of equipment, say, hey, you know what? You're down about 1.5% of the time. Kind of looking, okay, Verizon, that means that for just about 10 hours a month is about what I expect you guys to be doing for maintenance. Outside of that, you're probably out of your realm. AT&T, guess what? You're probably going to be spending a week a month maintaining your equipment because you guys can't, well, I'll leave it at that. This is a point where it'll start to become a nuisance. You guys have got to increase your uptime, you've got to get better equipment, and you've got to understand you have to be better neighbors. Trucks coming in and out, I understand emergencies, but if you guys can't keep your equipment up, I've got to really question, A, competence, and B, do you need 400 antennas just to keep a signal up? So you got some technology improvement to make, you've got some neighborhoods to help repair, and at least from this particular vote, I'm going to be looking for some strong standards to make certain that you guys are good neighbors. With that, I'll look forward to the motions.
Great.
Ms. Nelson?
So, Deborah, you want to get back and click us through some resolutions there?
Yes, this one says recommendation, but I think it would be appropriate to adopt it as a motion, which basically acknowledges that you've had hearings. You have the inch tonight and the inch from July 26th, and you've read everything and considered everything that was basically background for everybody. So if you could, one of you turn this into a motion, that would be your first one.
Yeah, so before we do the first one, I just want to make sure I understand the process here. So
Okay.
there will be then others per
Yes, then
carrier?
you will have a motion for the Verizon wireless
Okay.
facility, two separate ones for T-Mobile, and another one for Sprint Nextel. And those will be included in those adopting attachment 1, 2, 3, and 4. But this is sort of an overall motion.
Okay, so can I, well, I guess a motion should be made from someone from City Council, I guess. Yeah, so. Okay, thank you.
I'll move.
Any questions, Council, before we move on to a vote here? Mr. Grocott?
I think what she's asking for, and I'll try this, I move that we accept the analysis and testimony for conditional use permits at 920 and 924 Buckland Avenue and 260 Shelford Avenue.
Second.
You want more than that?
We need more. Mr. Rubens?
I would then add the third point and take no action with regard to 924.
Okay, and so, and take no action with regard to facilities at 924 Buckland Avenue.
Okay, your second on that?
I will second.
Okay, first and second. Any discussion? Especially on the first one before we move on? Okay, roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes?
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
Oh, I did have a motion. Sorry.
Jeez.
We've done it now.
Can we do this again, Mr. City Attorney?
Well, if you want to clarify, I think that this one's definitely a more thorough motion because it includes
Sorry.
specific references to prior meetings and
My
the
mistake.
code.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to present a competing motion. I think is how we do that.
Yeah.
And if the competing motion passes, the other one goes away.
Yeah.
So the competing motion is that we accept the analysis presented in testimony at the public hearing July 26, 2010, and September 27, 2010 regarding telecommunication facilities located at 260 Shelford Avenue, 920 Buckland Avenue, and 924 Buckland Avenue as a basis for findings and for the reasons for any amendments to the conditional use permits under the provision of the San Carlos Municipal Code sections 18.124.090 and 18.124.070.
Second.
Okay. Good job, Mr. Grocott. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes?
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
This would be the motion for Verizon Wireless with the exception of, it should say attachment 1 to the staff report.
I'll do this one. I don't want you to get too tired. Make a motion to amend to the conditional, amend to, is that the correct terminology, Mr. Rubens?
It should be amend the.
That's what I thought. Amend the conditional use permit dated October 25, 2007 for Verizon Wireless facilities at 920 Buckland Avenue with the finding that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to Section 15308, actions by regulatory agencies for protection of the environment and based on the findings and with the conditions as illustrated in attachment 1 to the staff report.
Here a second.
Second.
Rube?
With a question.
Question.
Ms. Nelson, is this 9A or 9B?
Hey.
This is 9A.
Still A.
It's
Okay,
for
thank you.
their existing facilities.
Roll call.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes?
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
This would be the motion regarding the 1996 conditional use permit for T-Mobile. And you would be adopting attachment 2 as the amendments.
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to amend the conditional use permit dated May 30th, 1996 for T-Mobile facilities at 260 Shelford Avenue with a finding that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, pursuant to Section 15308, actions by regulatory agencies for protection of the environment, and based on the findings and with the conditions as illustrated in attachment 2 to the staff report.
Second.
Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
This motion is regarding T-Mobile's 2009 conditional use permit, and it adopts attachment 3.
Sorry, Andy.
Oh, okay. I move to amend the conditional use permit dated October 15, 2009 for T-Mobile facilities at 260 Shelford Avenue with a finding that the amendments are exempt for the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15308, actions by regulatory agencies for protection of the environment and based on the findings and with the conditions as illustrated in attachment 3 to the staff report.
Second.
Yeah, that quick, huh?
Pretty cool.
Here we have first and second. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
All right, for the sake of time, I'll do the next one too.
Okay, finally, Sprint Nextel.
I move to amend the conditional use permit dated February 27th, 1998 for Sprint Nextel facilities at 260 Shelford Avenue with the finding that the amendments are exempt from the California Environmental Quality Act pursuant to Section 15308, actions by the regulatory agencies for protection of the environment, and based on the findings and with the conditions as illustrated in Attachment 4 to the staff report.
Second.
Okay, first and second, roll call.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
Is
Four. Yeah.
that all we need, Ms. Nelson?
9B.
Wait, there's more.
No, it's the fun one.
Okay, so we finished 9A now.
Okay. Thank you all for that. Okay, we're moving on to, again, second item in public hearing 9B.
Okay.
It's a public hearing for the purpose of hearing and considering all the comments and concerning the application of Michael Opalenik, et cetera, for consideration of appeal of the Planning Commission decision to grant Verizon Wireless conditional use permits and associated architectural review approval of a modified wireless facility pursuant to San Carlos Municipal Code 18.132.040 at 920 Buckland Avenue, APN 045-232-030. Ms. Nelson?
This is an appeal of a Planning Commission decision from June of this year for a new Verizon wireless facility on the existing pole to place two new antenna, and replace one antenna, and then include equipment in an existing equipment shed. This action was before the Planning Commission for some time. It came before you in July because we thought it was important to consider all of these together. It is new equipment on an existing pole. We did, of course, the community meeting also addressed this issue. The site is an R1 single family, as I've explained before, and the surrounding uses are single family, and it is this facility that is an old wooden pole. The approval was an architectural review for two-panel. This pole is 56 feet height. There will be LTE cabinets in the shed and a relocation of the antenna. So if you see the existing and the proposed, the difference is these antenna added, and then this particular piece of equipment removed, and an antenna that's existing replaced. This is the long view of the site. Up closer, you can see this is the facility from Buckland and Shelford, and this is as seen from the Cal Water site. These are the new cabinets that I showed you before, which now meet the noise requirements. The appellants have suggested that the existing structure is non-conforming, that it makes it more unattractive. I'm using those words rather than theirs, that it doesn't fit neighborhood character, that there's no need for coverage, that Verizon was at the time of the appeal exceeding the noise, and that it jeopardizes public health and safety. Regarding the nonconformity, as we discussed with the previous item, the pole was pre-existing, so once we put a telecommunication ordinance in place, its setback became nonconforming. That doesn't mean we need a variance, that just means it's a non-conforming setback. Doesn't make the structure non-conforming, things can be added to it. An analogy there is if you have a 3-foot setback on a house, you can continue that same setback with an addition to your home doesn't make it any more non-conforming. It's already at 3 feet. They've also said that the site's an eyesore. As we've reviewed before, it is kind of a utility site in this entire neighborhood, and this particular facility, this wooden pole, has been there for quite some time. You may, we've offered some language in the staff report that suggests that you may at some point decide there's a threshold where you want aesthetic improvements. This facility got updated in 2009 with 100% more antenna, and now there's 50% more added to that. And you may decide at some point there's a threshold that triggers you asking for a better, more aesthetic pole. Regarding the coverage, we asked them to show us that there is an absence of coverage, and that is presented with the Planning Commission decision. And really, a lot of this comes under the Telecommunication Act of 1996 of their need to provide coverage. And as Councilmember Ahmad suggested, it is the use that the community wants to have telecommunication or cell phone coverage. Also that that the facility doesn't meet basic health and safety. And often this comes up regarding radio frequency. We asked for that study with the application. It does meet the FCC requirements. And we have said for health and safety that our code also applies, and so we have conditions to address that. So the recommendation would be to deny the appeal and uphold the Planning Commission's decision, or you could uphold the appeal and deny the request, or you could grant a continuance, and I'll get to that in a minute, or provide us with other direction. So you did in July have a request for a continuance from the applicant Laura Boat to decouple this from the consideration of the other 4 use permits. Tonight you have before you a request from the attorney representing the property owner that it also be continued because there's been a rescission of the lease agreement. Now, we often require that the applicant have permission to do the construction and provide the facility on the site that the landowner has. We see that lease agreement. I think there have been instances where we have not seen the amendments to the lease agreement until after the application has been approved. But since you have requests from one side of the house, 2 people, the landowner and the applicant, to continue it, but you also have the appeal, which is before you. You may have a choice to give us other direction tonight. That concludes my portion of the staff report.
Great. Thank you, Ms. Nelson. Questions of the council?
I have a question of Ms. Nelson or the city attorney. So the rescission?
Well, I can't comment on its legal effect. It was prepared by the attorney for the property owner, and it purports to rescind an amendment to the lease from 2009, which adjusted the term of the lease. So it may be, the question that it raises is whether or not Verizon has a right to continue to occupy the site.
And it's really not our purview to decide whether they do or don't.
It's not. Well, we have we have required, and this is, but in a lot of cases it's the applicant's call, is whether or not they want to proceed in the absence of a lease. Most applicants want to make sure they have a lease that's contingent on the approval, is the way it's usually done. They secure the right to occupy, and then it's subject to the approval of the city for whatever required permits are needed. And it was a similar situation with the recent In-N-Out Burger. That was, purchase agreement was contingent on getting the planning approvals.
The problem I have is if we say, well, maybe they don't have a lease and we should continue it, who knows whether they're going to have a lease ever, and then we come back and we're in the same boat, and then all of a sudden Verizon says, well, we're not sure we're going to sign. And I'm not trying to say anybody would do anything, but it just goes on and on. It's like this. People point to each other. So, I mean, my opinion is we should vote on what's in front of us. In other words, what we're trying to do, as opposed to some of the extraneous things that could be happening on the outside.
Well, none of the people requesting a continuance are the appellant.
Exactly. Yeah, that's my point. And so, that's all stuff that's going on in the background, to my mind. So I just wanted to check with you that that's just information, but it really doesn't have directly impact what the direct appeal is of the appellant.
You don't have to grant the continuance.
Right. No, that's what I was just trying to understand that there's nothing that. Anyway, I got the information I need. Thank you.
Any other questions on council before we move to comment here, public comment? Okay. I'd like to open the public comment. Michael, you want to come up here and appeal first, and then Laura Boat, and anybody else then after that, welcome to come speak on this 9B.
Leave a nice picture up there. Mayor, council members. I'm opposed to the conditional use permit for the Verizon site under the circumstances in which it was issued. The existing structure is non-conforming in character and construction. The tower has always been an eyesore, and with the additional proposed panels, it will look worse. If additional equipment is added, the cooling and noise will increase. Why not fanless green quiet equipment now? Also, the site is for a not necessary service. Why more clutter on the hill? Let's be clear, LITE technology is for wireless internet, not phone service. In addition, the municipal code requires the proposed use and the proposed location not be detrimental or injurious to persons, property, improvement in the vicinity, and will not be a detriment to public health, peace, safety, comfort, general welfare, etc. The Verizon conditional permit was issued prior to any mitigation of the civil code requirements or the resolution of the noise violation, and should not have been granted under such negative circumstances at all by the Planning Commission. Additionally, I've been unable to locate the public record for the engineering and load factors from the American National Standards Institute, or ANSI, revision for the old wood World War II Buckland pole. Which is a radical increase in design requirements for towers and attachments. With the additional proposed panels and equipment as specified by ANSI, and I quote, even a change on the ground off the tower should prompt an engineering review by building officials of the entire cell site, because the basic tower may no longer be able to accommodate its present or future loads. Furthermore, the neighborhood had to pay almost $2,000 to appeal a permit that should not have been issued without more investigation by the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission's decision was, and this is an exact quote, have the City Council deal with this. So the community gets a new permit, many unanswered questions left in planning. To complicate matters, this permit is for an industrial neighbor in a residential neighborhood that needs to be forced into compliance with the law and then only wants to comply with the minimum standards to get by. That is not the actions of a good neighborhood partner. Let Verizon reapply at a future date when they get their act together. Thank you.
Michael, thank you. Laura Boat. Okay.
Good evening. My name's Laura Boat. I'm here on behalf of Verizon as the applicant for this modification. And just as was referenced before, the main complaint against the Verizon facility was the noise, which has been resolved and will remain so after this modification as safeguarded by the conditions of approval. The existing pole has been there since World War II, and it's not owned by Verizon. There's actually another user on the pole. At the top of the pole, the two antennas that are mounted at the top are not Verizon's antennas. Verizon proposes to clean up the pole as best it can by covering up the cables and using some newer mounts that would allow the antennas to be more flush to the pole. Also, we could paint those antennas so they can blend in more with the pole. We'll also remove the abandoned mounts. With regard to condition number 12, we just would like that revised to just state that the screening, a new fence for screening isn't necessary because nobody can see the equipment from any neighboring properties. And we would repair the fallen down fence on behalf of the property owner as part of this modification. And with regard to that, I should have said that first. The email from the attorney, that's the first we heard about the lease being rescinded. So, just so you're aware of that. And I have Verizon's radio frequency engineer here with me, Russ Benson, to explain the necessity for the proposed modification. I'd like to thank you for your consideration and respectfully request that you uphold the Planning Commission's approval. Thank you very much.
Great, Laura. Thank you very much. Russ Benston. And if anybody else wants to speak, would you get ready, please? Okay.
Good evening. My name is Russ Benson. I reside at 3432 Lodge Drive in Belmont, and I'm wearing two hats tonight. The first one is the resident of Belmont. If Verizon is denied allowing to put these two new antennas on this pole, it is going to deny 2/3 to 3/4 of the residents of Belmont fourth generation LTE high-speed wireless data service. This is the only site that services the central part and the west side of Belmont. Then I'm going to change hats and say from Verizon Wireless Engineering, a couple points. One, this wood pole was engineered here a few years ago, gone through when we added the antenna number 3 and 4, and was beefed up at the base, and those calculations were permitted at that time and showed that more antennas could be added. We would definitely like to clean up this pole more, but we do not own these two antennas at the top that have been there for over 30 years. I first moved to San Carlos in 1975, and they were there then. They belong, we believe, to Sperry Alarm Systems, and those are the two antennas you can see forever. But I'm sorry, we're not connected with them. The last thing is the equipment. The new equipment that would go with these antennas will be installed in the existing shelter. There is no additional air conditioning needed on that shelter to support this equipment. And now that with the exchange out to our latest equipment that we've done here a few weeks ago, we comply with the noise ordinance. And we see no increase in noise level by adding this equipment because we will not add any additional air conditioning equipment to that shelter. And I'm here for any questions you may have.
Great. Thank you very much, Russ. Okay, please. And if you could identify your name and where you're from. Great.
My name is Sam McLaughlin. My second attempt tonight. And I thank you very much. As stated previously, I'm an original homeowner and resident, has been in here since 1965. But prior to that, I had a home in the White Oaks area in 1957. I upgraded a beautiful home, the environment, lived peacefully up to this point. Unfortunately, as you age, your health is depleted. I had a massive heart attack in 2001, and that's my problem, not yours. My doctor, the cardiologist, has worked with me, and he says I have a few more good years, and I appreciate that. I'm 83, I'm proud of it. However, my health prevented me from attending a very important city council meeting on July 26th. With my present heart-related issues, my doctor makes it imperative that I get a sound REM sleep, not disturbed. Now, am I asking too much? I'll move forward. I'd like to say that I don't get it. I don't get it. However, one provider, the Verizon, has known about noise problems for years. It is clear to me they have done little to correct the situation over the years. They seem to be the greatest contributors to the noise disturbance in the neighborhood I live in. I say this because I physically attended one of the city-sponsored noise studies and heard how loud their equipment was and how close it was to my residence. I need this city to return our community to the past quiet noise levels I've been used to for my sleep and recuperation. Sadly for me, there are still strange, unexplained noises coming from some cell sites. About, I say a year ago, I brought a report to the Planning Commission and I said, how would you like to be awakened, not once, but I can go back and document the times, the dates, where I was awakened at 4 o'clock in the morning with a phantom roar. I thought a Mack truck was coming through my home. I'm not exaggerating.
Yeah. So, Sam, if you could start to summarize
Okay.
here then.
Yeah.
Great.
This breaks my REM sleep. The doctor says it's not good for your health. Now, I don't know what you people can do. I don't have the equipment to find out who the culprit is. But you know what? To this day, the intensity of that roar has decreased, but it's still there. As of 2 weeks ago, again. So, I don't know if these issues on noise have been thoroughly discussed. Now, that's my issue. I have a health problem, a noise problem, and I don't know anywhere else to go.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you, Sam, very much.
All right.
Thank you. I see someone here in the back. Yeah, please come on up. Thank you.
My name's Murray Roblin. I live at 2013 St. Francis here in San Carlos, and I've become aware of these issues over the last year or so, following the Planning Commission on a number of these items. I guess I wanted to bring up 2 points here, really. We heard Mr. Benson state that the antenna would be essentially serving Belmont. Certainly, serving Belmont is something good to do, all right? It's great to be a good neighbor of the city. But in fact, if it impacts the citizens of our community, all right, is it appropriate then to go ahead and deploy something really for the benefit of another area, all right, another city? And is it appropriate for you to essentially, you as the city council, to take that on? And the second item really has to do with the overall limitations, all right? We've heard that Verizon wants to add another antenna here. I believe Cal Water's the owner of that property, the owner of the actual monopole. At what point do you decide enough is enough? Okay, can they continue to add antenna there? Perhaps the engineering calculations will come back and say that it can support an additional 3,000 pounds of antennas up there. At what point do you decide that it's acceptable to say no more? Continuing to add these things without really having a good understanding of where you're going to go in the long term, which presumably would be provided by the zoning update coming in next year. It seems as if you're going to be incrementing yourself into a place that's going to be really hard to get back from. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to speak on this? Please come on up. Yeah, I'm going to be a little more strict this time because we spent a lot of time on 9A, so get through it, please. Thank
Only
you.
for a minute. I was interested in listening to Sam's complaint. It's from the studies I've done on ultrasound, infrasonic noise. His description is classic. This illustrates that the current noise ordinances are inadequate. This is a matter that is probably beyond the city council, but I just wanted to point out that it has the ring of veracity according to every study that I've read. The gentleman that spoke a few minutes ago said that the additional equipment will not add to the air conditioning that's required. A counterpoint to that is that the existing equipment will run longer in order to take care of the additional power load. And then finally, we spoke of vested rights, mostly in terms of the cell companies, but we have these residents who've been there long before the cell companies, and they have their vested rights. So I just point that out as a matter of ensuring that there's a balance of consideration. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Good.
Mayor Royce, members of the council, I'm Paul Albritton, and I am not representing Verizon Wireless this evening, but I have been representing telecommunications companies for the last 25 years. And I think it's important for you to look at this in terms of your own land use decisions. You're looking at the addition of these antennas in terms of their aesthetics and in terms of perhaps their noise impact. And from what you've been shown, these antennas are just a slight increase to the existing pole, so it's hard to claim that there's a significant adverse impact from that. The noise you've just heard has been mitigated and is in compliance. In addition to that, you should know under the federal law that you have certain restrictions. I'm sure you've been told about them many times. But one of them is that you can't prohibit service. And in this case, Verizon Wireless would be bringing in this new LTE service, which you were speaking of earlier. It's an extremely high-speed data network that also services voice and everything from the new networks that allow doctors to communicate to each other through iPad networks. The merger of phones and internet is a phenomenal thing. This is coverage that they don't currently have. There's a gap in their coverage for this service. And under the federal law, if there is a gap in that service, then they have to provide the least intrusive means of filling that gap. And in this case, instead of building a new tower somewhere else in San Carlos, they're suggesting putting a couple of antennas on existing poles. I don't believe there's any less intrusive means of filling that gap than putting a few antennas on an existing pole. Under a recent Ninth Circuit case, the Anacortes case in 2009, T-Mobile versus Anacortes, the court said that where a company shows there's a gap and that this is the least intrusive means of filling that gap, that it then, the burden shifts to the local jurisdiction to identify an alternative feasible location to fill that gap if this gap is not the least intrusive alternative. So I actually witnessed them install LTE in my office building in San Francisco. These are phenomenal pieces of machinery. The LTE box itself, it's the newest and latest and greatest from Sweden, I believe, with Maxwell Smart locks, double locks to open them, extremely quiet conditions, and extremely secure and bulletproof. I would encourage you to take the step to allow this to move forward. Verizon Wireless will be launching their LTE service before new devices are imposed on it. And it is, I think, behooves you to allow this very low intrusive means of providing this service where there's clearly a significant gap.
Great, Paul. Thank you very much. Okay. Anybody else on 9B?
Move to close public hearing.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Mr. Royce,
Mr. Grocott, please.
I know you want to go into discussion. I have some questions that came up
Let's
from...
get questions first, for
okay.
sure.
Whenever you're ready.
Please.
Okay. I'll jump on the most recent item that was just mentioned about alternative locations. And I guess this is for city staff. Are there alternative locations on the Hill that we're discussing here? Because you've shown us there's like 3 or 4 properties that have cell towers on them that would close the gap but be perhaps less visible, less aesthetic impact.
Well, there are, as I mentioned, this is where the Verizon site is. This is where T-Mobile is. Sprint Nextel is on this side of the Cal Water sites, and this whole area is on a knoll in the northwest quadrant. There are, in our files historically, a number of companies who've also sought facilities at this site. Cal Water reports to us that there are others seeking facilities at this site. AT&T may be one of those. So, but Verizon, at least until tonight, had the lease with this particular property owner. So, and this is the application that was before us.
Okay. So to summarize the answer, there are other sites there that they could apply for and perhaps might have a lesser visual impact on the neighborhood if their new antenna were on some other tower.
Well, I think you might want to ask that question of Verizon's engineer about whether or not they could be a different looking facility at a different height in a different location, still within this general vicinity. Because what we know is what was proposed to us and shown to us as the need in this this coverage area.
Sure, but in some regards, we were just told that, federal law, you can't tell them no unless you can provide an alternative site. So I guess I understand it's hard to do it on the fly, and I'm not asking you to do that, but I guess if the council wanted to go that direction and uphold the appeal, we would at least have the out that we could say there's alternative locations up there. You, Verizon, go find them and come back to us.
Well, I know that we did that with the residential installations that were proposed in 3 locations in the community, and 2 of those were denied by the Planning Commission, and 1 was suggested go look for another site, and the other site, I think, is a school site that's being proposed to us.
Mr. Grocott, do you mind if I cut in really quick?
No, go ahead.
It kind of has to do with what you say. What was implied is this is a very large coverage area for this LTD. It goes into Belmont, it goes into San Carlos. And I'm not just thinking about this site, but what other sites were looked at in that coverage area that could essentially have the same effect of being able to cover that area? If it seems like a very large coverage area, there should be multiple sites that could meet this end. What were the other sites?
And we'd have to have Verizon answer that question.
Did they ever bring that to the Planning Commission, though?
Not to my knowledge.
So they didn't bring any other optional sites, just this was the site we want, and that's it?
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you. And then it was mentioned by, I think, a gentleman over here that the pole engineering was done for new antenna, and I didn't catch the year that was done. And I am aware that
the Verizon facility was upgraded in, is it 2007 or 2009, with in your previous item. And as you know, our structural engineer in the building division does require lots of documentation about whether or not that pole would be sufficient. And what was reported tonight was there was some engineering necessary for it to receive the antenna proposed at that time, which now hang on the pole.
And that was what year?
That would have been the 2007 conditional use permit.
Okay. So that's an important date because, as some of the staff know, and if Chris Valley were here tonight, we've changed building codes. And one of the major changes of the building code from that date, 2007, to the new code, the International Building Code, is they addressed a lot of things that had to do with structural. Some of it eased up, and some of it got tougher. Mm-hmm. And I'd be curious to know if that pole were put under the same scrutiny again under the new code, where it would stand. No pun intended.
Well, we don't know that without the application for the building permit, but
Uh-huh.
it would be under the code that's in effect at the time the building permit is applied for. So it sounds to me like it would be under the new code that you're referring to.
Okay, and that hasn't been done yet.
Right, we have no building permit application.
Yeah, understood. Okay. Thank you.
Questions?
I asked mine. No.
Okay. So, thoughts, Mr. Klein?
Yeah, I'd like to start. My major concern is, this is a neighborhood that's been impacted by multiple cell phone facilities for a long time now, and these cell phone facilities, while they're necessary and telecommunications requires that we have them, they benefit a great deal of people, but all the impact has been really isolated on one neighborhood in this area. And what concerns me is that these applications are supposed to show that they've analyzed other sites. And talking to Ms. Nelson right now, it doesn't look like that was ever brought to the Planning Commission. It seems as if this was the site we want. This is all we're going to ask for. We're not going to do the work that would show why other sites don't work or look at other sites. And I would feel very uncomfortable approving something without that due diligence. Maybe there is another site that's not as impactful. Maybe there is a site where there isn't as much neighborhood around it. Maybe there is a site that's better. But unless we see any data that shows that, we don't know. And it just seems like there was a poll. They want to use it, and that was the application. But I do believe it is under our purview, and I'll ask Mr. Rubens, that we can require them to look at other sites.
That's part of the information you're entitled to review, and you can ask for that kind of information.
Yeah, and the only other thing what I was going to bring up is, is coverage. Well, this is a new technology, so of course there's no coverage, so that, that argument becomes moot, that we can't look for coverage data or anything like that because it doesn't exist yet. But I would like to see alternative sites looked at. I think it's unfair just to say, well, this neighborhood's dealt with it for this long, we're just going to put it there and we're not going to bother looking anywhere else.
Vice Mayor Ahmad?
I would only echo what Mr. Klein has said, and that I have a feeling that upholding the appeal until we have this additional data and would expose the city to additional liability. So to that extent, I would probably be in favor of a continuance with specifically looking for this additional data.
Great. Thoughts over here?
Well, I understand what my fellow council members are saying. Of course, if I'm a business person and I'm these guys, I'm going to find the spot that's going to give me the best coverage. Maybe it's easier, but why would I not take a spot that's going to give me the best coverage? I mean, then I'm just going to have a problem with other people not getting information. But maybe I'm missing the connection here. I understand your points, and believe me, I understand this neighborhood has been impacted. And I think it's been impacted because of the fact that all the companies have figured out that this is the spot that works. And if it didn't work, why would they go there? I guess that's how I'm looking at it. I'm sort of turning it around a little bit. Why would I put it somewhere else? And again, it's a rhetorical question, but maybe you're more technical than I am. But why would I spend the time and the money to put it up there if it wasn't going to do this? Mr. Ahmad, do you have any? I mean, you're more.
I would probably make the argument. You'd put it up there to some extent because it's there.
Yeah, is that right?
The equipment's there, the road is there, the poles are there.
Yeah, it's easier.
It's an easy choice to make.
Yeah.
But the idea of saying, well, geez, we need to find another spot. I mean, until I see the data, I'm not convinced that this is an optimal spot.
Mm-hmm.
We've heard that this thing's been out there since World War II. Guys were rubbing balloons on their heads to get enough electricity to come out there.
I guess it's a matter of whether you believe that it's because it's been there when the first one came in. It's just easier to add on than to find another spot to go through this process. And believe me, it is a process with other municipalities, maybe somebody in Belmont or another place, to have now another neighborhood come up and go, we don't want this pole here. And I think what happened was, as I remember, as Ms. Nelson alluded to, the ones that were going to be in the residential area, like in White Oaks or whatever, I don't remember ever seeing those. As she mentioned, 2 of them were withdrawn, I believe you mentioned, Ms. Nelson, and one just is still wandering around somewhere. But we never saw those come back to us. So obviously the message got to those folks, and they figured out another spot to put it to be able to make it better. So I do take, I understand from that standpoint where you guys are coming from. So this is a very difficult one because, it's just a real problem that we get ourselves into that gray area of what control we have, and what control the federal government tells us we don't have. As the speaker said, if they have new, I don't know what requirement they have to go and find another spot. I don't know if they have one. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. We'll find out, I guess, assuming if we decide to continue it. But they may not have a requirement. Just say, hey, we want to go there, and it's going to give us better service, and tough luck. I don't know. So it's a very difficult one for me. I'm not sure where I'm going on this one yet.
Good. Mr. Grocott, thoughts?
I'm bothered by this thing that I brought up about aesthetics, and alternatives, and it looks to me like it hasn't been looked at, and it should be. And even, maybe it's not here on the Hill. Maybe there's another location, but I can pretty much tell you that there are other places on the Hill that would be or could be less impactful when it comes to aesthetics of adding antenna. So I think all that needs to be looked at. So I'd be for I guess continuing the item is what we're leaning towards. I want to add a comment though, and this is out of it's not in the chain that we're in right now, but I just want to throw it out there. This hill also gets impacted by airport noise, and specifically engine run-ups, primarily by United Airlines at night, which is a very low-frequency sound when they do these engine run-ups. And I would be curious to know, maybe this one fellow that deals with sound and seems to be a scientist in that area, if you have the convergence of two noise sources, what that does, where you've got this fan noise going on at 40-some dB, and it's of a certain frequency, and here comes airport noise, engine run-up noise, very low frequency, and the two converge. What does that do? Maybe that's what's waking up Sam. I don't know, and I just throw that out there for consideration.
Again, from the meeting here, I know this is already complicated enough without bringing.
There may be. Sorry, Mr. Mayor. There may be reasons why it's so complicated.
I think it's a good point to show the complexity, but I would like to stop in the analysis of airline noise because I don't think we're going to have the facts here. But it's a good point as an additional item, but if we could save time and not trying to analyze it right now. So with that, what I'm hearing is some movement towards continuance. Want to take a shot at a motion and see where that goes with council here?
Through the mayor.
Mr. Rubens.
The procedural steps you take if you'd want to continue it is first I'd like to hear again from the applicant whether they would agree to the item being continued to provide that extra information. And then secondly, you'd, assuming that were the case, you would reopen the public hearing because it's a public hearing item, the appeal, and then you would move to continue it on a second motion.
Mr. Rubin's question, why would the applicant want to have it continued?
I think that this is to protect the city because there's some issue regarding.
But if the applicant says it doesn't, then we have to vote on it.
You'd have to make a decision tonight. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not the appellant, but it's the applicant?
The wireless carrier.
Okay, so the wireless carrier can come up here and say, we want you to vote on a continuance or not.
They've asked for one previously. I want to make sure
I'm
they're
I'm just understanding what the rule of law
they would do is they'd ask for the continuance, and the reason is under federal law, I have a concern about the timeline to approve a new antenna installation like this.
Okay. Sorry, I just want to understand. Thank you.
Okay, so would the applicant like to come up here and
tell us what they want to do?
Tell us there. Okay.
Yes, we would like to request a continuance so that we provide the alternative sites and engineering information.
Great. Okay. Thank you.
So, Mr. Mayor, I move to reopen the public hearing.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Okay. So that means anybody who has spoken can speak again?
At the next meeting, you'll be able to.
Our next meeting when
Yes.
they come back. Okay.
You should continue it to a date certain based on that request.
But we still need a motion and voting on the continuance.
Yes, you do.
Okay. So can I hear a motion?
Wait, Mr. Rubens, you said you need a date certain?
Right. Date certain.
I think that's the best
Fair.
way to keep the information flowing.
Mr. Maltby would.
But how long do we think we need to get that
November
new
8th?
information is the question.
Yeah, I think we need to hear from Verizon in terms of the length of time to gather that information.
Yeah, we don't do it. They do.
Okay.
They're discussing.
I'm sorry. What'd you say?
30 days.
30 days. Okay. Thank you.
Either October 25th or November 8th.
So that would be a November 8th date. Okay. So can I hear a motion?
I move to continue this topic until, what was it, November 8th, 2010?
Second.
Okay. Any discussion before we take a vote on that? Okay. Roll call, please.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
No.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay. Okay. Thank you. We okay to keep going here? Yep. Okay, we're moving on to new business. Last two items on our agenda this evening.
Give it time for people to clear out.
Let me kind of hold off for a little bit here. I got people moving. Feel free to stand, stretch your legs here if you want. This is the time to do that.
Good.
Can I go get a double-double? Oh, it's not open yet.
Really? Oh, don't tease
That'll
me
be
like
April.
that.
Go down to veterans. What time do they close?
1, 3 or 4 in the morning.
See what? You already know. You're.
I know.
You're,
Hey, that's good.
you're
I know because I read the reports.
in and out. He said he wanted a double-double.
One, yeah.
I said, what time do they close? The one on veterans, and now it's open down on Veterans Boulevard. Yes.
Okay, we have under new business two items. One is consideration of the our municipal code parking ordinance, and the second one, 10B, will be related to revisions to the sewer ordinance. Let's start off new business, 10A, consideration for an introduction of an ordinance amending San Carlos Municipal Code 10.32.224 and 10.32.225 and 10.32.228 parking. Saturday, let's see, parking. That's it. Please, Mr. Weil, or staff report.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I'll be real brief. This covers three different issues related to downtown parking. The main driver was the current ordinance, which suspends time limits from Thanksgiving Day through January 2nd each year in the downtown. And so there's no enforcement of parking limits. People can park as long as they want. They can park wherever they want and stay there as long as they want. And the staff felt this is probably a poor use of that resource, that actually it discourages the spaces from turning over, and that what you want during that time period is people being able to find parking spots easily. And actually, when there is this lack of enforcement, there's probably employees parking in choice customer parking spots because it's easier and they get there first. So it was an idea of staff to try to increase economic development and business retention to create that greater amount of turnover. The Chamber went out and surveyed members, got a mixed reaction on this, and a couple of their board members are actually opposed to it. But we thought, let's bring it to the council, see what the policy decision is on this. It's not a real strong recommendation by staff. It's just kind of good management, good housekeeping, in our opinion. So that was the main thing that drove this. The other two are incremental changes. We have about 400 some spaces that are in the 4 parking plazas that the city operates. And 94 of those spaces are set aside for employees to park. And we issue permits, sell permits for those parking spaces. Currently, the permits are only in effect Monday through Friday. But there's more and more economic activity on Saturdays. And we thought, well, if it's good Monday through Friday, it should probably be good on Saturday too. So we would just extend the duration of that permit program to Saturday. Again, more of a good housekeeping management item. And then the third item was a request from the Chamber of Commerce that during farmers markets
market events that the parking spaces that are behind Laurel Street Park be reserved for the event organizers. Currently, they're available to the public, and they're kind of choice spaces if you know where they are, because you can find your way in there and get there. I do have a change to that recommendation. It was brought to my attention that the handicap space, I think there are 3 spaces, one handicap and 2 regular spaces. The handicap space really probably should be reserved for handicap users who want to come to the farmers market. Currently, it's actually, even though it's not reserved for the farmers market organizers, it isn't available because the porta potty is located in the handicap space. And talked to Dave Bouchard at the chamber. He thought, well, we can change that, and it's probably best practice to make that available because that's kind of a legal requirement. So I would change the ordinance when I bring it back to you for adoption to have just the 2 regular spaces reserved for event organizers and not the handicap space. So with that, I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Great. Any questions?
I have a couple questions. Saturday, you're extending the permits to Saturday. Will people have to pay extra for that?
No.
Okay, so so you're just giving them a benefit, the employees, an extra day.
That's correct.
Okay. And the only thing, it keeps saying eliminate free parking on holidays. And I understand the holiday season, but I don't want to get a ticket on Christmas.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not sure if it's written that way. It doesn't look like it's written that way. The ordinance, it's a little bit convoluted. Maybe Mr. Rubin's, I don't know, being too technical on this, but it speaks to the fact of during the holiday season, well, that's including Christmas, Thanksgiving. It includes those days. Not that our parking folks are going to be running around working that day. They probably aren't working, but it doesn't eliminate. I guess it's just.
We're repealing a particular section in the municipal code that deals with this parking time limit, lifting of the parking time limits during the holidays. So it doesn't affect the other parts of the parking ordinance. It's just that one section.
I'm getting exciting about semantics which don't apply.
That's right.
Okay. I just wanted to check. Thank you.
Good. Questions? I'd like to see if anybody would like to speak a question. Mr. Grocott?
Event organizers? Who are the event organizers?
The Chamber of Commerce. Yeah.
Oh. Okay.
But I think I'm not totally sure how they do it, but I think they work with another organization that runs the event. But
Okay. And then I have a question regarding the holiday season, because we also have furloughs with city employees. So, I don't, my opinion, well, let me just ask the question. I can discuss the opinion later. What's our furlough period currently?
Well, it's between
Christmas and New Year's.
Christmas and New Year's. Although the police are not furloughed.
Police aren't.
Yeah, I know, but the fellow that does that is, 24th or 25th or what?
Well, it runs from the 26th.
It varies.
If I'm not mistaken, the 25th is Christmas is on a Saturday this year.
Yeah.
Which makes the holiday fall on the Friday, which would be the 24th, if I'm remembering the calendar correctly.
Okay. Well, I don't want to get that technical because I'm just thinking of the ordinance, and if we put some language in, you see where I'm going. That while we're on furlough, the city employees, that this parking thing would be also, perhaps. It's just I want to bring it up as a discussion item, so I want to know the details. So,
I think it's important to note that the parking enforcement function will no longer, as part of the contract with the sheriff's office, be done by San Carlos City employees.
Okay.
That's right. So
as of October 31st. So.
Yeah. December, but still, so it's December 24th through January.
It would be January 2nd typically, depending on on how the holidays fall.
Okay. And there's, unfortunately, as you put in your report, there's no data about whether what the council did in 1990, which was intended to increase business, whether that helped or didn't help. That's a lesson to be learned. I've heard that in other things we've done too.
Okay. I'd like to hear anybody out there would like to share any thoughts on this new business item, 10A, I believe here, 10A. Okay, so with that, get some discussion. Maybe start here on the right.
Yeah, I have a couple things. And Mr. Grocot's right. There's no data from when they changed this or why exactly it was changed. I know it was to encourage shopping, but 1990 downtown is very different than 2010 downtown. So I think it's worth looking at. Maybe we could do it for a year, see if there's major complaints or issues, and revisit this in a year so you can actually give us a recommendation on how it went, if it made things easier. Because I do believe having, because I'm on Laurel quite often, I watch as the employees hop out of their job and move their car from one spot to another every 2 hours. So I know if we get rid of that, it just makes it easier for their car to stay for the entire 8-hour shift or whatever it is. And we do offer employee parking. The permit process is fairly easy to get. When I worked on El Camino, I had an employee parking permit. And I mean, I rarely used it, but it was an option for me. I also understand the need for the chamber to have parking near the event for the event organizers. I know it's like being in a group that runs events, especially as large as the farmers market is, and the last thing you need is to be able to have to go run to your car in order to go get something or to go do something. So I understand the need for that. It is only 2 spots on top of that. Yeah, so I'm okay with all 3 of them. I would just like this to come back in a year and see how it went.
Good. Vice Mayor Ahmad?
Just to follow up on Mr. Klein, if we did the holiday parking for just 1 year, would we want to do it by ordinance? Can we just do the ordinance without that holiday parking issue? Maybe set up just a 1-year program for that.
Well, you could modify the proposed ordinance to make it have a sunset, and it would end in a year, and then it would automatically revert unless you acted to reapprove it.
Okay. I would just like to have some actual data at some point.
Okay. Gentleman over here. Mr. Casilli?
Well, obviously, I don't shop very much because I had no clue that this even existed. So I didn't realize that there was free park. Now I'm really disappointed. But I don't have a problem.
We appreciate all the ticket revenue.
Yeah. I don't know. We could sunset it, I guess, for a year or try it. I mean, since we don't have any data, I guess that's probably the way to do it. The other ones I don't have any problem with. I don't necessarily have a problem with this one either. So.
Mr. Grocott?
I guess I'm in. I feel like if we're going to get the data, we should continue it as it is another year and gather the data during that year and see, what things are like, how much activity we have, how much do we have complaints from shop owners that there's not parking available because there's not enough turnover and so forth, and establish the data that way and wait a year on this. Regarding the 2, they are just 2 spots, but boy, if I own that burger joint on El Camino, and I know parking becomes even more tight when we close down Laurel Street for the remaining businesses because it pushes parking. Those are a lot of parking spaces that get pushed away in order to have the event, and now it's 2 more. And I know the place on I can't think of the name of it, but yeah, Pudley's. They have a tough time running that business regards parking as it is, and then to lose 2 more would, and people that those are kind of secret parking spaces. But if you own Pudley's or if you go to Pudley's, they're there, and you use them. And I hate to take them away. So the only thing I agree with tonight is let's move those porta potties and get them off the handicap spots. But other than that, I would just leave things as they are and let's go another year and gather the data that way.
Okay. Let's see. So I think we have a unique situation in San Carlos. Actually, council raised the issue of parking meters during some of our budget talks, 8 or 9 months ago, and there was pretty much consensus is no meters in San Carlos. I think that system works well because it goes along with a system that we have a process in place for movement of cars, and that's why we have this 2-hour limit, and we have generally a patrol that manages that. I mean, there are people that kind of sneak out and move cars 1 space here or there, but generally it's a program that I hear a lot of compliments to, because cars are moving, you could go and enjoy a lunch. 2 hours is adequate, and you could shop. And any of the shopping you could do, you could hit a couple stores and Bianchini's and be out of there in 2 hours. So I'm looking at a broader picture. We have a process that works well. And then when I read this report, I said, we had what kind of program? I've been in town 31 years. I've never heard about this.
Well, there's two of us now.
I don't even know that we excluded this. And so the second question I asked myself, well, why? If we have a system that works, why would we forego a system that then actually encourages employees to park all day long on Laurel? So I have questioned why this was originally proposed, and the other issue is I like data to make good decisions, and a couple council members have talked about, well, let's study it for a while. I don't know how you would study that, or how costly it would be to say, or my mind works. I'm not sure I need a study. I just look at the logic of, again, promoting a system, no meters, encourage movement. It seems to be successful. So why have this unique exception during the holidays when you would want more movement? You want to make sure that system works because there is so much shopping going downtown. So I can support all the changes back to normality, I guess I would call it.
Mr. Mayor, if I could just add one comment. The only problem I have with sort of the issue with the sunset is what information are we going to get? Who's going to give me the information in a year?
Well, I think, and not to interrupt, but the chamber polled its members of the downtown. They could do that again and simply go, hey, what did you think of last year?
So
our public works director could find out if there's been complaints. We could talk to the businesses because this could affect them. And I think after a year, they'll have gone through it, and maybe 90% of them don't even notice.
Yeah. Do we, Mr. Rubens, can't we in a year, if there's a number of complaints, come back and change this anyway?
Yeah.
We don't need sunset or not sunset?
That's absolutely true.
And I never said we need a sunset. I just said
I misunderstood.
No, I was like, let's just look at it again in a year and have someone come back to us.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
I just wanted to take to market.
Okay, so we can look at this whenever we want.
You could amend the ordinance again in a year if you want.
Well, I'd like to call the question. I'd make a motion to I'm sorry.
Mr. Grisilli, if I may, I would like to, just because of the way I want to vote, I want to take this on. You can take on the rest of it, but I would like to propose an ordinance change that adds permit restrictions on employee parking spaces on Saturdays, and for now, just leave it at that because of the way I want to vote.
Okay, so that's the motion you want
That's
to
my
make?
motion. Yeah.
Okay. Any seconds on that?
I'm just breaking it up,
No,
Mr.
I
Vine,
understand.
so that because of how I want to vote on it.
So Mr. Grocott is saying there's three
three parts.
parts to this. There is the going back to
what you're
all
doing.
years
Okay, I'm
all
sorry.
year parking standards. Employee parking on Saturday would be
Okay.
adding, and the third is parking behind downtown.
So
park.
I'll second that based on the fact that there will be another motion coming.
I worded that incorrectly. I would like to introduce an ordinance. Yes.
One at a time.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's.
So
second on
I'll
that?
second that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
I get it now. I'm sorry, I
I got it.
misunderstood.
Okay. Roll call.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
Yes.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay. You want to make a second then?
You guys can take the rest.
I'd like to make a motion.
Introduce.
Or introduce a motion, or an ordinance.
Make an ordinance, yeah.
Where did it go?
All right.
Well, I'll do the easy one, and Bob can do the harder one. Reserving the spaces behind Laurel Street Park for farmers market event organizers, as requested by the chamber.
Second.
Okay. Roll call.
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. Okay, do
So
I hear a third motion?
I'd like to make a
Grisilli?
motion to introduce an ordinance to eliminate free parking on during the holiday season for down to on Laurel Street, I guess. Is there a section? There's more than Laurel Street, isn't there? There's a
Yeah, the downtown. Say downtown.
Well,
It's a defined section in that we're repealing.
right, a special section of which I'm not quite sure which one it is, whether it's 224, 225, or 228. 228, okay, thank you. Section 10.32.228.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, we have,
Yeah, that's the
Okay.
one.
okay, we have a motion as to the third part. Have a second?
Yeah, second.
Second? Okay, I'm sorry, missed that. Okay, roll call?
Councilmember Ahmad?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grocott?
No.
Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes.
Okay.
Just for the next meeting, would you like us to bring for the adoption the two different, based on the vote, we could bring it back as
Two
to
ordinances.
arrange for two different votes for you, so.
Thank you.
No, that's all right. I didn't have time to explain.
And 10B, last consideration of ordinance amending San Carlos Municipal Code 13.05, 13.08, revisions to the sewer ordinance. And before we start, I'd like to appreciate the people that are staying here late in the evening here. Would have tried to move you up, but I think a lot of the audience was here for items 9A and 9B. But thanks for sticking with us here tonight. Mr. Weil.
Mayor, I've got a presentation that's probably about 15 slides or so, and I know in the lateness of the hour, I don't know if you want me to go through them, or would you like me just to briefly summarize?
Timing, the norm plan A would be about how long?
I could get through them in about 10 minutes.
Yeah, I think this is a pretty important item.
Yeah.
A lot of money and a lot of regulatory. I think. Yeah.
Try to.
You may
try
cut
to go
down a little
quickly.
bit slide here or there, but
All right.
let's hit the major points for sure.
Okay. Well, the need for the ordinance, I kind of covered in the staff report. You know, it's a health and safety issue. We do have a consent decree that says we shall do certain things. And looking at that, I said, you know, I need to do what's in the consent decree, but I really needed to do a comprehensive job and fix all the things that need to be fixed in the ordinance while I'm at it. So to get our goals on sewer overflows and sewer backups, we need to not just do sewer inspection at resale improvement, but also when the city initiates repair or replacement of the sewer main, when the city initiates sewer backups, or when there is a SSO or backup on a particular lateral. We need to look at the fog or fats, oils, and grease, and encroachment into easements. I have some photos to illustrate this as we go along. Okay. Just a few graphics to illustrate this. There's infiltration and inflow, and you'll hear these referred to as I&I. And inflow is the big problem that we're dealing with in San Carlos, and that's when, as these things that are highlighted in white here, when there's a source of stormwater that connects directly to the sewer system, what happens is that really floods your sewer mains and causes overflows. You see here, just defining some terms. Upper lateral is from the property line in, and lower lateral is from the property line out. And under the city's current practice, the lower lateral is public and the upper lateral is private. This is a good picture of what tree roots do, particularly at this time of year. Many of the old laterals are made of vitrified clay pipe, and they have joints that fit together. And the tree roots, the very fine tree roots, will find that opening in that joint, seek the air and water that's in the sewer pipe, and then start to break apart the sewer pipe. And you'll see some pictures of a tree root a little bit later on. We have an average of 63 sewer overflows in the past 5 years, and of those 63, 47 are on the mains, like down here, and 16 are on the laterals. Now we need to get down to 4 by 2017. So I've got to take care of those 16 that are on laterals, and then the problems on the laterals also affect the mains. In the ordinance, it talks about sewerage facilities, and you can kind of visualize that if there's a lot of inflow on the upper part of the system, it's going to overflow on the lower part of the system. And we have that a lot. October 13th of 2009 was an example. Councilmember Ahmad came by my office that day. It was a early heavy storm, and within a half hour of this kind of cloudburst over the hills, the manholes were popping down on American Street. And I got a call from a business owner down there. He said, he kind of said, this happens all the time. And, could you guys just come please pick up what's, the toilet paper that's out there on the street? It happens all the time. And on that, last year, in 2009, we spilled over 60,000 gallons and only recovered 6,000 gallons. So that's 54,000 gallons of sewage. This is all estimated, but that just went into the environment. And most of it was on that one day. So to deal with that problem, we have to deal with the inflow particularly. We do have problem with sewer backups. This is a tree root, and these are wipes. And when I'll get rid of the gross pictures, but when there's any kind of problem with the joints, or as I was talking about, those clay joints tend to get broken apart or settle, or maybe they weren't put in properly to begin with. Things get hung up, and then when they get hung up, it overflows, and it overflows usually at the clean out. Sometimes it'll back up into the house. So both are bad, and we pay for both. In terms of sewer claims, our average loss to the sewer line fund in the last 2 years was $280,000 per year. And this comes from the ratepayers. The ratepayers are paying for this. If it overflows, we get fined. So we have a problem either way. Now, these are some of the primary causes of these sewer overflows. Roots in the sewer main, roots in the laterals, debris. Debris, often what I mean by that is baby wipes. We have a big problem with those. Yeah. And grease, infiltration, and inflow, and we've talked about those. So roots in the sewer main, we've done the root foaming, the chemical treatment, and now we have better nozzles to clean off those roots. That seems to be pretty effective. Our overflows are down this year because of the root foaming we did earlier this year. In the lateral, I think the best preventive measure here is the inspection ordinance. In the debris, we do hydroflushing, education, and to some extent enforcement. Now, grease, I put SBSA, the South Bayside System Authority. We've contracted with them to do grease inspections in food service establishments, but they don't have the ability to go out and make anybody comply with what they find in their inspections. So that's why we need an ordinance to back that up. Infiltration, the inspection ordinance will help with that. And then inflow, the inspection ordinance would help with that. And then this program of smoke testing, and I'll show you what that's about in a second. The ordinance has general requirements for sewer laterals, how to inspect it, what the standards are. This Orangeburg pipe, this is a picture of an Orangeburg pipe. It was popular during World War II when materials were scarce, and basically it's tar paper wrapped in a tube, and it wasn't intended to last this long. It's still in use in San Carlos in numerous places. And the bottom line on this is it has a procedure, but this works like our sidewalk ordinance, where if the repairs are not made, the city will make the repairs, invoice the property owner. If they don't pay, upon a hearing of the council, it can be placed as a lien on their property. So that's the way the sidewalk ordinance works right now, and it would work the same way. Now, improvement, we defined improvements as new sewer connections, remodeling over $75,000 or 25% of area. That's straight from the consent decree. We put these other things in here, additional toilet, a change in use. And this one's we haven't had much concern about. It's kind of like what we were talking about earlier. You know, if you're applying for something, you have to do the right thing. You got to come up to the codes that are in effect at the time, and pretty easy to understand. Inspection upon resale. There's a requirement to disclose whether a valid certificate of sewer lateral compliance is on file. The seller's responsible. The transfer is contingent on the completed inspection. We do provide for security to be posted for repair or replacement. I searched ordinances of all, around all the areas I could find, And this seemed to be a workable procedure. This actually one came from the city of Ukiah. They had a pretty effective ordinance, I thought. This 3-month transition period after the effective date, that's something we could talk about, and I've got a slide to talk about that a little bit later. Now, we want to catch, basically this ordinance is designed to deal with laterals at every appropriate opportunity. So these are some pictures from our recently completed project. This is the sewer main being replaced with pipe bursting, and here's a worker redoing a sewer lateral. This is the upper lateral, and this is the lower lateral. And so you see this is nice white clean pipe, and this is the old pipe on the right. And it would say, okay, when we're coming through and doing this work on the lower end, let's at least have the property owner inspect the upper lateral to see if it's in good shape. And what I'm really looking for, more than anything else in that case, is the inflow that causes so much trouble. Here's the smoke testing. Basically, you pump smoke down into the sewer system and see where it comes out. This doesn't show it, but you plug sections of the sewer main so that it doesn't just disperse into the system. And in this case, here it is puffing out of a broken clean-out cap. And that's an easy one to repair. You just put the cap on it. But there's a lot of cases where property owners have found it convenient to take their drainage into the sewer system rather than discharging it out, putting in an expensive pipe system to take it out to the street, or maybe they're in a situation where they're a downslope backyard and they don't want to discharge it to their neighbor's property and possibly incur liability in that respect from drainage law. So it's a nice, convenient place to take the drainage. But it causes a huge problem, as I talked about earlier. So when there's a overflow or a backup, that also seems like an appropriate time to require an inspection. And this is an inspection ordinance, but if the inspection finds defects, it would involve repair and replacement. I picked this picture here, this graphic, because it shows that this troublesome clay pipe can be replaced with a plastic pipe that has no joints. It can be, as I showed, slipping through a new main, you can also slip through a new lateral. It's not cheap, but it's a much better technology because it's less prone to tree root damage and less prone to those joints cracking and settling and different and offsetting from each other. So the realtor concerns lack of turnover, 2% per year would reduce the effectiveness of the ordinance. And my response is that, well, we're looking at all aspects of the ordinance working together, resale and improvement in the sewer main project and the smoke testing and the SSOs, and also we have a provision for voluntary certification. Concern is that the time of sale would be inequitable, but as I said, every opportunity we're looking to do that. Impact to sales transactions. The city attorney speaks better about this than I do, but we see it as the inspection as a benefit to the buyer and to the realtor. That the buyer gets an assurance that they have a good sewer lateral. There's something I wanted to mention here. And that this resale would be a good trigger now and in the future. It's an appropriate time to do that. And it's increasingly common that this type of ordinance be in effect. Mentioned in the staff report, East Bay Municipal Utility District, which serves a huge area, is looking at this very ordinance. Okay. On the effective date, there is an option for the council to extend the transition escrow period. It's currently a 3-month period after the effective date of the ordinance, which is April 1st. You could look at a longer transition period there. Okay, fats, oils, and grease. Another ugly picture here, but if there was a lot worse, I could have put up there. This is the grease lining the pipe, kind of like clogging your arteries, if you could kind of picture it that way. And we just need more teeth to make this happen. So I'll pass around there. The part of the ordinance deals with encroachments into easements. There's a couple pictures here. That's a sewer manhole. It's underneath the fence. And here's one that's underneath a concrete bench. And we have this situation, but we really don't have anything to facilitate resolution of these situations. We have, of course, a legal right as the owners of the easement, but this would put in procedures to help address this situation equitably. So I'll end with this slide. I think I did it in 10 minutes or so, with why the ordinance is needed and how it complements the other things that we're doing. Well, thank you, Mayor, Council. I'm glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Questions first, and we'll get some public comment on this.
I had a question, Mr. Weil. Let's assume that we never sold another house in this city. What is your process to do all this? I mean, are we going to go street by street, or are we going to go so much a month? I guess I missed that in here.
Yeah, didn't cover that.
What's the process? Putting the real estate aside for a moment.
Yeah.
What's the process to get to keep this consent decree and keep us even up, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, I'd say the biggest bang for the buck that we're going to get is the process of prioritizing these basins that have the high inflow.
Okay, so you've got a plan.
Yeah.
Okay.
What we're going to do is we're going to go out and actually measure flow in throughout the whole system,
sure,
and see how it responds to storms.
Uh-huh.
And then we'll see which ones jump up when right after.
So
the storm.
how long do you think it would take to get through the entire city?
I don't know yet. I know I intend.
I'm sorry, I
to do
didn't
that.
mean. I thought you did. I apologize. I didn't mean to ask you a question you know the answer to.
It's 11,000 sewer connections.
Right.
So I don't know what our production is going to be able to be, or how big the problem is even, really.
Okay.
So I don't know.
Okay. Well, I knew there had to be like I said, real estate aside, there has to be some system that you've gotten an idea of.
Yeah.
That we're going to work on this, obviously, because we've got to comply, so to speak. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Weil, to jump on kind of what Mr. Grisilli was saying. So, say again, we didn't sell a single house. You go through and you do these smoke tests. There's a house that fails the smoke test. How does that work? What if you say, well, you need to replace your lateral, and they say no?
Then we would say, give them a notice to repair. They would say, no, I don't want to do that. And after the time period passes, we would hire a contractor to do the lateral repair.
Okay. Now,
they'd be invoiced for that.
Okay. Now, will that work when you're doing these inspections? You're doing them because a problem has arisen.
Well, the smoke testing we'll do because there's a lot of inflow coming from that particular neighborhood. So that's the problem that would prompt it.
Every time we have one of these backups on a resident, is it because there's been a lot of inflow, or do sometimes they just happen and you haven't been able to detect that they were going to happen? Sometimes something just gets caught, or there's been a lack of maintenance and it just hasn't appeared to be an issue, but has kicked back up.
Yeah, it could be. It's not necessarily. There's a variety of causes, and it's not necessarily due to the inflow problem that I am kind of overemphasized in this. It could be one little tree root, and then all the baby wipes get hung up.
Yeah, exactly. Because
an offset joint,
because we have a very low threshold that's being presented to us by a consent decree of 4.
Right.
We have 11,000 homes. It's very easy to get to 4 very quickly, and from what I was reading here, a lot of some of it's undetectable unless we go house by house.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, move to extend the meeting to 10:45.
Okay, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Other questions? Okay, anybody who would like to speak on this, please come on up. Welcome. If you don't have a speaker card before, do one after. Record your name. Come on up. Hi. Again, thank you very much you enjoy the show here earlier?
Of course. Good evening, Mayor Royce and the rest of the City Council. My name is Michonne Coleman. I'm the Director of Government Affairs for the County Association of Realtors. And we have submitted extensive written comments regarding our opposition to the time of sale mandate, but I wanted to just reiterate some of our primary concerns. We understand that the city, of course, faces an enormous challenge coming into compliance with the consent decree by reducing your spills down to 2 by 2017. Our argument is that you're simply not going to get there relying upon time of sale. The benefits versus, what you're going to get out of it really are not quite equitable. We believe that utilizing a mandate at the time of sale, of course, won't work. They're inefficient. Right now, there are approximately, as has been discussed, 11,000 homes in San Carlos. In 2007, 296 homes sold. In 2008, 258 homes sold. And in 2009, 236 homes sold. That equates to a less than 2% turnover annually, at least for the last few years. So you're going to be looking at 40, 50, or more years in order to actually achieve your benchmarks that are required by the consent decree. We also believe that time of sale mandates are incredibly inequitable. You're really placing a burden on a small group of people, those who are buying and selling homes in a given year. We also think and know that these mandates create delay. This isn't just about the transaction itself, but as we've discussed in our written comments, in this current climate, we have a lot of people who are going through their short sales. They need to get out of their homes. Whenever you have these inspections that come up, you're dealing with a bank that deals you're negotiating with a bank in another city. You have a buyer who's distressed and needs to get out of their home. They have an inspection, and if that inspection comes up where they have to do the repair, that can effectively stop the entire transaction. So instead, we propose that you take a more proactive, preemptive approach, and there are a number of alternatives that the city could explore. You could, of course, do a date certain. You could establish that by a certain amount of time, every home in the city has to be inspected. That's certainly equitable, and it's something that's doable. I know that oftentimes the argument is, well, that's going to cost too much money. We're going to have to increase sewer rates, or it's going to require too much staff time. However, if you establish a date certain and you then approach it by using a very targeted approach, you can probably isolate very quickly where you need to focus your target, where you need to focus your attention. Staff can look at the California Integrated Water Quality System. We've gone through their database and have checked their records, and it tells you when you're going to have root intrusion or whatever the problems are. Usually it's homes that are quite old. So with all that said, we know that Mr. Will has also proposed a very proactive, very aggressive method of going and checking all of the laterals and the mains, and we would suggest that if you do that, it really sort of renders the need of time of sale needless. So we would appreciate if you would consider removing that, at least that part of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Come on up.
I'm Jeff Craighead, and I'm also a member of the San Mateo County Association of Realtors. And I'm also on many committees with the California Association of Realtors, and we've seen these point of sales come up over and over and over again. And I can assure you they just don't work, and they're just not going to accomplish what you want them to accomplish. In addition, one of the things that you have to take into consideration in these different times of recession, what has always taken us out of recession in the past has always been house sales. And anything that you do to impede those sales is going to hurt our recovery as well as hurt the individual that's trying to sell or buy a home. And as Michonne pointed out, we don't have that many foreclosures or short sales in San Carlos, but we certainly do have a number of them in the area. And what you're going to run into is a situation where the banks can refuse to put any more money into it, and the guy that's selling short doesn't have any money to put in it. So you're going to create a burden for yourself. I think it's a great what Mr. Wheel has put together, with the exception of the point of sale. Please don't put it in point of sale. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Jeff. Other thoughts or thinking? Welcome. Oh, I see someone getting ready. Yeah, come on up. Hi.
My name is Mary Harris. I am here as a citizen of the community and also as a real estate agent that works in the city and has done business here for 10 years. I've been a homeowner for 20 years here, and I have been seen and been subject to the flooding issues that happened during the heavy storms and stuff, and what the cause of the overflow of the sewers was at the time, I'm not sure. I do know what affected me personally was some creek issues many years ago, but I believe that the approach that the sewer lateral inspection at the time of sale is taking is inadequate to as a method to address the order flowing from the San Francisco Baykeepers lawsuit, and to meet the SSO of 4. It's been gone back and forth 2 and 4. I think it's 4 SSOs by 2017. Like Michonne and Craig or Jeff just said, the turnover of properties here in San Carlos is so low that I think it's a very inefficient method to try and meet that kind of requirement. And I'm not going to actually comment on the law, but I would believe that the courts would also agree that that is not an aggressive approach to try and make something happen, especially when the numbers are so easy to see. The 2% would not adequately give benefit to reaching the goal. What I don't, one of the things I wanted to bring up is there was something that I believe I read earlier, and unfortunately I don't have the document, that the certification would be for 10 years. Is that? And I'm wondering, what is the recourse of the new buyer should that certification, what is the 10-year do? Guarantee them that they're not going to have an issue for 10 years? And then what is their recourse on that? So I just, that's one of the issues, but I think more importantly, the time of sale is just not an effective method for getting to the goal that we need to get to.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Anybody else? Robert, do you want to comment on that last comment on the certification 10-year?
Certainly. Well, the ordinance does allow that if a certificate has been issued in the past 10 years, it does not have to be re-inspected. It's no guarantee that there won't be any problems. It's just that it doesn't require a re-inspection.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Question on that question, please? Well, come up to Mike so we could hear you, please. Sorry. Question on the question. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, if it doesn't require another inspection, but that's only if there's no issue. But if there is an issue, what does that certificate give the buyer? Okay. What assurances, other than at a point in time, it's certified at a point in time, just like a sold comp is a point in time. So is a certificate of inspection at a point in time. It doesn't guarantee any future benefit to the buyer.
Okay.
So I would question that.
Thank you. Another question, or?
Another question. Who's going to keep hold of that certificate?
So I'm sorry. Usually we just have public comment, but at this time, go ahead, please. Go ask your question.
Who's going to keep record of that certificate? Is that going to be kept by the city of San Carlos? Going to be like a 3-hour report, or is JCP going to be able to get a copy of that to put it in their report?
Yeah, Robert. All right. Hey. No other questions from people that have spoken already.
Well, the ordinance calls for me to develop procedures for all that. At this point, I think what we're planning to do is have the city issue the certificate and make it publicly available.
Okay.
That's what Burlingame does with their
Good.
ordinance.
Okay. Got that. Good. Any other speakers? Okay, great.
I have a question for Mr. Weil. Mr. Weil, you just mentioned that Burlingame has this program. Did they have this program before or after their consent decree?
They had it before their consent decree.
And so they still got sued?
That's correct.
Okay. Well, then I have a follow-up question. I'm sorry to hog the mic. I haven't talked much tonight, so I have something to talk about.
Are you sick, or?
No, I was doing it for you, Bob.
Okay.
Just doing it for you. Just keeping quiet for you. Normally I'm a chatty Cathy up here, so, tonight was a weird night. Do you think, in all honesty, Mr. Weil, with all these different aspects, and the time of sale is just an aspect, it's one piece of the puzzle of everything you're going to do you really believe that this will get us down to the level of 4 overflows in 2017?
Well, now let me clarify that too, that number 4. The consent decree says 2 overflows from laterals and 2 overflows from
so
mains.
4 total.
So it's 2 from laterals, 4 total. I do. I mean, I think this is a program, an integrated program, and all the parts of it working together will accomplish that goal.
Okay, and then another question. Given the option, would you be more aggressive? If the council was leaning that way?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, would you be more aggressive? We tend to sometimes get things from staff that they think they can push the council as far as that goes,
Mm-hmm.
and they don't give us the more aggressive approach based on they don't think the council will go there. So they get as aggressive as they believe we would go. If you were given the opportunity, would there be an availability to become more aggressive and to really go after this problem?
Let me make sure I understand the question. I think what you mean by aggressive would be to say, by this date, everyone shall have their sewer laterals inspected, and if there's any defects, have it repaired. It's kind of like what Ms. Coleman was talking about. I hesitate on that. Now, the military man in me says yes, but I hesitate on that partly due to manageability. It's a big system, and I don't know what our capacity would be to accomplish that in that period of time. Laterals are not the biggest problem we have. We have a pretty good program for managing laterals now. Where our numbers for overflows have mostly overflows from the mains and less from the laterals. Burlingame's were like the reverse, and they despite the ordinance, and that's a good point. But I think that this is a manageable approach, so I think where we can be aggressive is on the smoke testing. And Councilmember Grisilli asked me about that. How long is that going to take, and how many can you do, and how fast will you be able to address it? I don't have that information yet, but that will work within this ordinance, and it'll be a matter of how many resources we can put into that.
Okay, thank you.
Related or close question?
Yeah, it's related.
I'll come back to you.
Yeah, that's fine.
So I did some math here and broke it down. 11,000 households over 7 years. That's 1,600 a year.
Mm-hmm.
Break that down 12 months a year. That's 100 comes out to 130 a month that we would have to do inspections.
6 a day, 7 a day,
Mm-hmm.
working days.
Right.
Yeah.
1 an hour.
Yeah.
Keep breaking it down. Okay, 1 an hour.
Well, it's not the laterals that are going to be if you can fix the bigger problems, the laterals are going to take care of themselves. To some extent, you're not, because otherwise you can't do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think there are sections of town that are worse than others.
Worse than others, sure.
And I don't know where those are.
I understand.
And I think that's the time to be aggressive is once we know where those are.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, that's.
Brooke, another question? Or is that?
No, I'm ready for comments.
All right. You want to go first or last?
I'll go.
Yeah.
All right. There's parts of this I completely agree with. And first off, I don't know if you did cut and paste on this, Robert, or where you got all this written material, but it's obviously a lot of work and appreciated. I appreciate the approach, and I agree entirely almost with the comment on page 1 that the purpose of this chapter is to establish requirements for property owners to inspect, maintain, repair, and or replace sewer laterals, relief valves, and so forth. I would inject one word. The purpose of this chapter is to establish requirements for all property owners to inspect. And I think that's where Mr. Klein was going. I know it's a big task. I know we only got 7 years, but I would go with the military man. That's what I would do. I think this approach to ask people at point of sale to do this, or even though it was in our agreement with the baykeepers to do it based on certain remodels. It's inequitable, and it's not how you would approach a patient. If you had a patient lying on a table and they're bleeding, you're going to go to where the bleeding is. And so I think we've got to figure that out first. Where are the areas of town that this is the biggest problem? And then I think we need an ordinance that there's a lot of this that I agree with, Mr. Weil, but there's the part about remodels or point of sale I don't agree with. I think we need to take an approach where we look at the whole city and address it that way. It might be a big item. We've broken it down. It's a lot of inspections and so forth, but I would appreciate more of that approach than what we're doing. So enough said there. That's the way I look at it.
Mr. Pacelli? I somewhat agree with my colleague, Mr. Grocott. I tend to agree that, well, as you mentioned, we have to have a plan first to go after this. I don't agree to the I don't think the point of sale is I just don't. I mean, if we were doing 2,000 house sales, I'd have a different spin on this because in 5 years it'd be done and we'd all be set. But I do. One of the speakers said the inequity of it. You know, you're sort of making a special case because someone wants to buy or sell, and I don't think that's appropriate in this case. Now, I do disagree with my colleague relative to the remodeling side. I know that's his business, and I know he has, you know, a different perspective on this. But if it goes over a certain dollar amount, which I thought was fairly substantial, that you had, I didn't have a problem with it. Obviously, if you want to put in, you know, fix a window in your house, that's not a remodel that would need it. But if you're going to expand your house, especially when you set an extra toilet, or if you're going to expand the size of your house, or you know, make it bigger, or if there's completely new plumbing going in or something, I think it's appropriate that we look at this. So other than that, I tend to agree with what you have in the ordinance here. And Mr. Mayor, I'd like to make a motion to extend the meeting to 11 o'clock.
Second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Through the chair, I did leave out one comment, and I just wanted to point out this idea of date certain works out also with page 4 of the ordinance, which that's the one about the compliance certificate. And it seems to me that if we attack the city region by region and said, this region, it's all going to be done by this date, and we will issue certificates, and then when we come back around in 10 years, you just do it in the same exact order. And then those certificates mean something. Otherwise, if they're just issued, but it's all piecemeal and here and there and willy-nilly, that's going to be really difficult to keep track of or police.
I'm going to agree with Councilman Grocott on a lot of his comments. This comes down to a maintenance issue, and Mr. Weil and I, when I first got on council, we sat down and we talked sewers for a really long time. It's just weird to have those discussions sometimes, but we sat down. Yeah, exactly. But this is a very important issue for our city. Sewers, they don't get the credit, they don't get the paper, you know, the headlines that police and fire do, or they don't, you know, they're rarely talked about in public. You don't run for council on sewers, but they are a huge part of, yeah, I guess you could, but no one's tried yet. They are a huge part of our infrastructure, and they're a part of our infrastructure that's failing. That's why we were sued. That's why we came up with this program. That's why we're doing a lot of these things we're doing. And I would like to get more aggressive. I don't believe the 2%, or the point of sale that triggers 2% is aggressive enough. Even if it was 2,000, a lot of times homes sell multiple times in any given period, and a lot of the homes that are causing these issues, I believe, are older homes, and those tend to stay in the family for a long time, and sometimes they get passed down. I do think we need to attack this piece by piece in the city. I think a date certain is a much better way to go. It does make it equitable. I think certain remodels should trigger it, especially if you're changing plumbing. If you get a new toilet or you're going to add more inflow, you definitely that should trigger it. But I believe we need a much more aggressive way to combat this problem, because it is a problem, regardless of whether you agree or not that we should have been sued. We are dumping really hazardous materials into our bay. And that's not just an issue for San Carlos, that's an issue for all the people who live in this community, in this area. So I would like to see us get much more aggressive, which I'm sure will make Director Weil happy, because I think that, you know, when you get a lot more carte blanche, it makes your job a little easier. But I would like to see a much more aggressive ordinance. I'm okay with the majority of it. I just would like to see something stronger where we go and we look at the residences, we decide what the hot spots are, we attack those first, and then we make our way through the city. And like Mr. Grocott brought up, 10 years later, you come by again, and and the smoke tests most of them are going to come up clean because you came up clean before. And it's a way to maintain our infrastructure, because when these things go bad, they do affect all of us. We lost $280,000 in our sewer fund, and that's money that could be used to do other things.
Like smoke checking your car.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we need to get better at the maintenance. We need to make sure our citizens understand that if you don't maintain your laterals, it does affect everybody, and it's something that we need to do. And I would like to see it just get a bit stronger.
Mr. Mayor, I'll just echo what Mr. Klein said. In disclosure, I did meet with Ms. Coleman earlier this morning and asked for one bit of information regarding a program that San Mateo is doing for their inspections. It's something called the Healthy Home Program. They are trying to do a date certain inspection citywide. It's something that I'd like to have our staff take a little look at, but also we have gone out and partnered with other cities on other types of tasks like this. I recognize Mr. Weil's staff is, man, some of the hardest working boys in San Carlos, no stretch, but would love to be able to see if there's an opportunity for us to partner with other jurisdictions and also look at these additional programs that put some incentives into place. Maybe there's some grant money out there that we can also grab. So I would just like to concur, getting aggressive with this program is interesting, and I do have to concur with the points about the point of sale that probably not ready to go there on this particular ordinance.
Great. Okay. Sounds like there's a lot of consistency here. I had one example at Lake Tahoe. It's done South Lake Tahoe has done a lot of work on reducing the runoff in storms and so forth. They found that all that pollen and runoff goes into the lake, and so they have a program through all the homeowners and so forth for people to make improvements on drainage around the roof lines and driveways and so forth. And it's basically it's related here. It's so important for everybody to pitch in and do what's right. And I agree with how to do it from what everybody said here.
I just want to make a point that if you put a date certain on this, I mean, there's a dollar cost involved in this, right, Mr. Weil, to do all this. And that dollar cost is going to get passed on to the citizens. So I'm not saying that it isn't going to eventually be passed on anyway, but I think we need to identify I don't have enough information dollar-wise and time-wise to go on a date certain. So I don't know whether we should introduce this ordinance tonight.
Councilman Grisilli, just to go off what you're saying, because in no way would I be ready to vote on a date certain right now.
Okay, I'm just verbalizing. I'm not sure where we're going, so whether we want to continue this item or whether we want to just take out it sounds like the property owner or point of sale thing would be replaced. Whether we want to do that or whether we want to continue this and get more information, I guess that's what I'm trying to push for. Just the choice of the council on what they want to do.
Mr. Rubens, you haven't talked for a half hour. Come on.
Well, the consent decree requires that this matter be brought to you by this meeting, and we've done that. The idea of the changes that you want to make are fairly extensive and might require some more data points and information for you. I mean, I think that sounds logical. I wouldn't recommend you introduce tonight. I just recommend you continue it, give staff time to do some more research on a program that's more mandatory in nature, that provides for a date certain. Maybe he can give you some rough estimates of the cost of that and how it would impact rates. And it may be that there's some other programs that are out there that we haven't contemplated yet. But the consent decree required that we propose to you the private lateral programs. I think there's merit to it as part of an integrated system, but it's not necessary that our ordinance to reach our goals include that particular provision. So that'd be my recommendation. Come back with some revisions to the ordinance with some more factual analysis of the alternatives that you might have available to you.
The only point I would make to my colleagues is that if we're all fairly consistent with the point of sale, to just eliminate that so that it precludes the folks from SAMCAR to come back again and sit through 3 hours. That was the only point. I don't know if
that was clear to me, so I would.
But,
I would think
but
that
I wanted to make sure that it's clear to everybody else so that that point's gone, moved, dead, move it on.
Yeah, we're not changing our mind.
Okay.
On that one.
So-
Although it would be nice to have them come back and enjoy the hospitality of downtown San Carlos.
That's right, buy dinner.
Yeah, buy dinner again tonight. Okay, so
Mr. Mayor, I move to continue this item with direction given to staff to eliminate the point of sale and integrate the other comments.
Second.
okay, I'm not allowing any discussion. Let's take the vote.
Sorry. Councilmember Mott?
Yes.
Councilmember Grisilli?
Yes.
Councilmember Grospat? Councilmember Klein?
Yes.
Mayor Royce?
Yes. And again, thank you all for staying here so late. Adjourned.